probably seen these before. You've probably seen these before. You've probably seen these before. Almost every driver in Formula 1 has their own logo. You've probably seen these before. Almost every driver in Formula 1 has their own logo as part of their personal brand image. Most of them have it on their helmets, but they can also stick it on all kinds of merchandise for you, the fans. A shirt, a hat, socks, the official George Russell Funko Pop. But I had an idea recently. What if we could push these logos further and use them for the ultimate merchandising opportunity? A Formula 1 track. If a driver decided to buy thousands of acres of land, dig it up, and then lay down kilometers of tarmac in the shape of their logo, well, whose logo would be best? I made a track map for each of them, dusted off the old tier list, and then once and for all figured out the answer to the question that literally no one has ever asked before. Some of these tracks turned out right actually, and some, they're absolutely cursed. In order to find which driver's logo would make the best track, I've laid out the track routing for everyone on the grid in a way that's still recognisable as their logo. I realised early on while making these that I had to decide whether every single track was going to be clockwise or anti-clockwise. In order to avoid any complaints that I've made a track better or worse by giving it, the wrong direction, I decided it would just be more fair to make them all clockwise. It's the most common direction for racetracks, and also, if it's good enough for 10 billion clocks all around the world, it's good enough for us. Once all the track maps were made, I set about over many long evenings studying them long and hard, so I could rank them all, tier list style. There's obviously a few things we can't use to judge these tracks on. Elevation plays a big role on the quality of a track in real life, but sadly, none of these drivers have a 3D logo, so we're just going to have to assume that all of these are flat. There's also other things, scenery, history, crowd atmosphere. We've got none of that, but there are a couple things we can use to judge these tracks on, which I have summarised in a nice little acronym for you. Action, as in how likely are overtakes, battles, and other incidents like collisions or barriers around the track. Separation, as in separation between good drivers and great drivers. A good track hits that sweet spot of difficulty with enough variety of challenges in order for the cream of the driver crop to rise to the top. And finally, satisfying viewer experience. Is it varied? Are there some odd little bits that make it easy to tell which part of the track you're watching? Or is it just the same 20 corners repeated, with boring straights in between? Everyone knows the best straights are not straight. With all that in mind, we can judge each track by looking at their qualities and sticking them all on the tier list. Let's get started. We start things off with the current Haas pair of Hulkenberg and Magnussen, who have been a couple of very naughty boys, so I've had to disqualify them. Why? Because they don't have logos. The only thing I can find from Hulkenberg is this. That is not a logo. That's typography. They are not the same thing. How dare you? It's okay. His punishment, a multi-year contract at stake. I've seen some graphics that claim that this is Magnussen's logo, but I can't actually find any proof of that. It's not on his helmet, it's not on his website. What is on his website though is this, which once again, typography. These would obviously make terrible tracks even if I did try and do them, so I'm not going to. Hulkenberg and Magnussen disqualified. Go away and think about what you've done, and maybe hire a graphic designer while you're at it. We then have a couple of drivers who are on thin ice for very similar reasons. They both have something which can barely be described as a logo, and weirdly, they both recently had redesigns away from something more iconic. First up, we have George Russell, who used to have this thing, which, let's be honest, it wasn't great, but now he's replaced it with this. Thin ice, George, thin ice. We then have none other than Daniel Ricciardo. Now, you may be thinking that this is Daniel Ricciardo's logo, and it was for the longest time, but recently he's had a redesign, and now he uses... Daniel, mate, your clothing line on Shantae, I love it. It's amazing stuff. Where was that energy when it came time to design this? Thin ice. Thin ice. Anyway, these two things do count as logos, so let's do George first. This logo is obviously very square, and so turning it into a track makes an equally square, kind of parking lot vibes track. I know it's a completely different layout, but it just makes me think, Sochi. These weird straights up at the top are ruined by this shallow chicane thing, which is still fast enough actually that people may die trying to get through turn 4. Might spice things up around here, who knows actually. Horrible lack of corner variety, and I feel like I'll just get dizzy watching people go through this section between turns 10 and 15. Our first track on the list, horrible F. One thing I will say though is that Georgia's track has a normal number of corners, high praise, I know, which is not something I can say for Ricardo's track. What were you smoking, Ricardo? 40 corners? Obviously, this is way too long and complicated to be a good Formula 1 track. Maybe it would be good for like an endurance kart track, but it sucks for open wheel racing. There's some sections I'm not against. This section, 19 to 26, is quite nice actually. 36 to 40 as well. But then, this has huge long swathes of just boring, mundane, bland. I reckon that a lap around here would be around 3 to 4 minutes. Obviously not good for on-track action. This one is going in F as well. Another driver with a pretty basic logo is Mr. Alex Albon, but actually, I quite like this one. I know it just says AA23 horizontally, but it's got enough stylization to make something pretty sexy. I'd be more than happy to wear some t-shirts with this on. Alex, if you're watching, if you want to send some free merch to the channel, you know where to find me. That being said, when you turn this into a racetrack, oh no. This gives me the vibe of an oval track's infield section where you're constantly turning off and back onto the oval. That is fine, of course, but oval track infield is not necessarily the most inspiring type of track, is it? This section from 10 to 24 does look like it would be a lot of fun to drive actually, with some good variety and corner angle, but much like Ricardo, the overall track is just way too long for Formula 1. I do like the Roval vibes, and by the way that lots of these logos look, we may see it again in some more successful layouts. But this one is just way too long and a bit too stop-start for me. I need some more of those medium speed corners. As an actual logo, Sergio Perez's Silevamp may be my least favourite. It's just so janky, man. You know, sometimes your first idea is actually not your best idea. Try again. As a track, on the other hand, it's actually not that bad. I'm reminded of Bahrain when I look at this, which is the track which I love. We've got the decreasing radius section that is Bahrain's turn 9 and 10, not once, but 3 times on this track, and also 3 times in reverse. We've got these high-speed follow-throughs of 8, 9, 10 into the heavy brake event of 11. We've got a nice little hairpin. I'm liking it. The one thing that's lacking is maybe a longer straight, but I can get over that. I think this would be a great track to watch qualifying on, and it could even have good racing, particularly if people can make moves down into 4 or 14. This is our first actually decent track of the video. It's solid. I'm putting it in B. I still hate the logo though. When you put all the F1 driver logos side by side, you start to notice some trends up and down the field, which are mainly driver initials or driver numbers, written in italics. Oscar Piastri and Carlos Sainz are probably the 2 most basic of the logos, being literally a set of initials and a set of driver numbers, respectively, written in italics with nothing else. However, I can see potential in both of these. Oscar Piastri's logo turns into a nice simple part oval track, which I really like. It gives me Red Bull Ring, it's given me Indianapolis, it's given me Twin Ring Motegi if they ever used to combine road and oval layout. I think I would recommend maybe tightening up turns 4 and 11 to make just proper hairpins, give some of that corner speed variety. But as it stands, this is a proper power track, somewhere between maybe a Monza and a Zandvoort, and F1 fans, they love power tracks. I'm sticking Oscar Piastri in B as well. Then we move on to Carlos Sainz's logo, and actually the double striped font here gives us these nice interesting squiggly switchbacks at the end of the 2 straights. This logo is literally just 2 numbers written in a basic font, but it gives a very organic looking track. I love this section from 10 down through to the hairpin at 13, then down into this massive right-hander, which is reminiscent of turn 3 at Catalunya. I think you'll get some decent overtaking opportunities down into turn 1, and actually I think there's a chance you'll get cars able to go alongside between 2, 3, 4, 5, very similar to places like Bahrain. Not such a fan of this weird chicane in the middle of this straight. It's giving me Formula E vibes, which I'm sure I don't have to tell you is not a good thing. But that's really the only negative I have to say about the Autodromo Carlos Sainz. I think this is our first truly good track of the video, I'm sticking in A. This next group of logos I'm calling the Lego Letters bunch. They're still just driver initials, but they've been stylized by making them more blocky and angular, kind of like a 5-year-old has made them out of Lego. I know that sounds like criticism, but I should add that I do really like the Bottas and Leclerc logos. I think they're simple and compact enough to work great on any merchandise, or even on a website logo, social media icon. Good stuff, really. I like them. The Pierre Gasly logo, on the other hand, that's trash. Bottas up first, and when we convert this into a track, wait, do my eyes deceive me? That looks like a banger. We've got straights into hairpins, we've got another long sweeper like Turn 3 at Catalunya, we've got a triple follow through into a hairpin, which will just be amazing to watch a car do in qualifying. This is a solid track. Really nice variety of corners here with some interesting concepts. But sadly, I cannot give it an S tier. It has maybe one too many of these corners all at the same angle, which could get boring. And then also, it's the wrong initials, Valtteri. People are going to think this is Jenson Button's track. This is meant to be a merchandising opportunity. Those negatives aside, this is still a really solid A tier track. Gasly up next, and despite the fact that in logo form, this is trash, it's a track I think actually could be quite interesting. It's not great, it's giving me Caesar's Palace car park track vibes with his 3 big finger things, but we've got some corner speed variety, low speed, high speed, medium speed corners, this tricky windy section where cars could maybe fight side by side if it's wide enough. It's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. Not as bad as some of the other ones we've seen so far. I'm going to stick it in B. And then Leclerc. While I like this logo, this track is whack, Charles, what the hell? It's giving me oval track infield without the oval, it's giving me Sochi Autodrome short track version, it's giving me slightly outdated kart track where they give you the race suits that clearly haven't been washed, and the Velcro at the front doesn't do it properly. Not great vibes, just too basic, too short, not fun. F. These 3 drivers I've grouped for obvious reasons. Okay, I get it, we've got 3 drivers whose names all start with L, but you could have made the logos a little bit more different, surely. Let's start with Sargent, because of these 3 logos, this is clearly the worst. My first thought when I looked at this awkward section in the middle was that this would just be way too complicated. But as I started to work on this jank fest, actually, I started to get kind of into it. I started to find some of that variety I was sorely missing from the other tracks, with some twisty organic shapes, this lovely double follow through around the curve of the S. As I was working on this, I had a thought that I think no one has ever had before. Let Logan cook. And then I stepped back to see the glorious creation. Oh no. Give me that spatula back. Logan, you are never cooking again. This midsection is just way too complicated, and basically you have to do it twice. It is like something out the Monaco Grand Prix, then coupled with these boring ass Sochi straights. It's just too much for one track. It's basically like Baku, but with too much Baku. It's going in D. Norris and Stroll next. Now as I was researching this video and looking at these 2 logos side by side, I was thinking to myself, surely one of these drivers copied the other one. These logos are just so identical. The only reason they don't use the same logo is because these 2 have different second initials. Obviously, Lando's logo is the more famous of the 2, and so I, like many of you, assumed that Lance Stroll must have come along later and just copied him. But best just to verify that before I start throwing out accusations. I looked at old photos from each driver's junior career and plugged both of their websites into the Wayback Machine. I might have gone a little bit too far back and discovered that LanceStroll.com was first used to collect RSVPs for his bar mitzvah in 2011. Yes, this is the exact same website that now looks like this. Anyway, through my historical research, I found that Lando Norris first made a version of this logo for the 2017 season, and then Lance Stroll came along and released his one for the 2016 season. Wait, that's before. Are you telling me that Lance Stroll is the one with the innovative graphic design out of the 2? Wow, Formula 1 never ceases to amaze me. Lando Norris, 2-bit hack confirmed. Now that my whole reality has been shattered, how well do they do as tracks? Lando Norris's is basically the same thing in both halves, apart from this little section here in the middle. It's given me Red Bull Ring vibes, or maybe Sector 1 at Baku, but just 3 times. That's not actually a good thing. I do like a track that reminds me of Spielberg, and it could be amazing if this is going up and down hills like Austria is, but we have to assume it's flat, and therefore C. Then, moving on to the OG L-Boys logo, and actually, I think this one works better. The top of the L here is not as interesting, but I do have to give it bonus points for not just repeating the first half of the lap again. I'm a big fan of follow-throughs and medium speed corners, so I really like this section from 3 through to 7. And then this here, 12 to 15, a wind-up corner where the radius increases to match speed. Beautiful. Again, it's Austria vibes, but I think this one captures the magic of Austria just a little bit better. I'm sticking it in B. Max Verstappen's logo is very simple, but by adding in these little hairpins to show the outline of the 3 shapes, I think it makes a nice, quite varied track. It's short, yes, but I think you get some interesting action here. It reminds me of the Bahrain Outer Circuit as used in the 2020 Sakhir Grand Prix, which was a banger. It's a bit slower than that overall, but I think these fast sections into hairpins will make for some great TV. It's like having Cops or 130R, but like 4 times every lap. What's not to love? Well, maybe the G-forces. Despite the simplicity, I think this makes a good circuit. I'm sticking it in A. And that's good news, because if we were going to see any of these in real life as like a kart track, this is a strong contender. It's the kind of thing Max would do. Or even just in a sim, Team Redline. Make it happen. So now we come to a group of logos that are all very unique compared to the rest of the grid. Mind you, I said unique, not good. Hamilton has his famous wings logo, which has been on his helmet forever. Tsunoda has this nice leaf design, which I think is one of my favorites to go on a piece of clothing. Joe clearly is unaware that the noughties ended, and then Esteban Ocon seemingly has 2 logos. Esteban, don't be greedy. It was a bit of a toss-up to decide which of these 2 to use. This one shows up on the header of his website, but then this one is on his helmet, and it looks like it's on maybe the most clothing items on his site. And to be honest, it is the much more interesting of the 2, so I put the EO81 logo in the bin and got to work on the signature logo. Finally, getting to a hand-drawn style of logo means we can actually see some organic shapes on a track, which is always a good thing in my book. Well, almost always a good thing, because Esteban, this is awful. To start the lap, we have straight, hairpin, interesting bit, hairpin, then into another hairpin, which kicks off maybe the worst section of a racetrack I have ever seen. As soon as I drew this, it reminded me of the old Abu Dhabi layout, which was a crime, quite frankly, and this is worse than that. I'm happy to see some organic shapes for once, but this track is just straight trash because of it. F tier. Joe's Tribal Z suffers from a lot of the same issues here, with all of these tight, intricate details giving us something like 17 hairpins per lap. Every single lap around here would feel like a rally stage up the side of a mountain, not a good thing, and so despite some novel ideas, I'm gonna have to stick this in F tier as well. Honestly, my guy Joe should feel lucky there is not a level below F, because this track is putrid. Tsunoda's logo had so much potential, but sadly, we do need to include this little 22 at the bottom. It sinks the whole thing down. The lap starts off so strong until we get to about turn 5. It's just, no. After that, my love for this logo does not translate into love for this track. I do like a natural curvy straight, but you gotta link them together with some more variety in the corners. Tsunoda then is on the verge of greatness with some good ideas, but poor execution. I'm gonna stick this one in D. And then we have Hamilton. The wings logo results in probably the shortest track of this video, which is more reminiscent of Mario Kart than it is Formula 1, but I do think it could work. As the first positive, this one is not all hairpins. We've got some low speed corners, high speed corners, medium speed corners, windy sections, very fast sections, including this 6, 7, 8, which is similar in ways to like a Sochi Turn 3, but with a faster entry, and therefore the difficulty cranked up to 10. It's simple, but it's nice. Sakhir 2020 vibes once again, which is always a good thing. I'm sticking this one in A. And with Hamilton in A, we now have quite a full tier list and quite a few contenders for the best driver logo track in Formula 1. But the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed one thing missing. It is, of course, Fernando Alonso. Alonso has one of the most unique driver logos, to go with some of the most unique driver merchandise, which includes, and this is not a joke, Fernando Alonso olive oil. But how well does his signature style logo translate into a track? It didn't go that well for old teammate Ocon. Unsurprisingly, we get a track with a very natural profile, but this time, it's not just full of hairpins. This whole section on the left gives me ideas of Jeddah or maybe Spa if it had a decent elevation change. This arrow section on the right gives me ideas of the never used Hanoi track. Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, as we never raced there, but I do know it looks very dumb. But studying this thing, I do think we could get some great racing around here. Overtakes under braking into 1, 3, 6, 8, maybe even 17 if you can hang on together through here. And speaking of this section here, the wavy high-speed nature of it should give some amazing qualifying viewing, similar to something like Jeddah. I really like this track. I think it could be good. No wait, not just good. I think it could be great. I think it could even be our very first S-tier track. And with that, we're all out of logos. Well, there you go. Once again, and completely out of character for this channel, Fernando Alonso is the greatest of all time, at least when it comes to logo-based track design. I should inform you that Fernando Alonso does actually have his own kart track in the north of Spain, but he missed a bit of a trick and did not trace around his driver logo when creating it. In his defense, he did have to go around the end of this actual airport runway when designing it, so I'll give him a pass this time. You've probably seen these before. Formula 1 teams are basically massive advertising campaigns, and so each of them has a distinctive logo to help them stick in your mind. The Red Bull double bull, the Ferrari crest, the McLaren swoosh? Kiwi? What do the team call this thing actually? The speed mark? No, that's a silly made up word. I'm calling it a swoosh. These teams have worked long and hard to make sure their logos are recognizable, but have they worked hard to make sure their logos are good track layouts? We've already done this with the driver logos, but now it's time to take a look through the 10 teams on the grid to answer the question that no one was asking. Which Formula 1 team logo would make the best track? A couple ground rules, which you'll know if you watched the previous video. Each of these tracks will be clockwise to avoid any kind of bias, because track can be good one way, but trash the other. We're assuming all of these are flat, because even the most boring corner in the world could be interesting if you stuck it on the side of a massive hill. Most of the teams have a full logo like this, but obviously these would make terrible tracks, so we're going to be using the icon versions of each. Basically, whichever one shows up in the timing panel or on the nose of the car. And finally, we're going to be sticking each of these onto my trusty old tier list to find out which ones are good and which ones will be keeping the F tier warm, along with the Zhou Guanyu rally stage and the Daniel Ricciardo drone, which many of you pointed out contains a high risk of collisions if someone spins onto the wrong section in the middle here. Why? What did you think I was going to say? We kick things off with Alpine. Now, I would say this team is generally pretty strong on design. Ignoring the past couple years, this team has a history of some of the best liveries in Formula 1. But does that design skill extend to their ability to accidentally make a good track layout when designing their logo? The Alpine A is obviously very angular, and I initially thought we would just have a boring series of 90-degree corners. But after I drew this thing, I realised we have some good corner variety here. Some nice follow-throughs, including turn 1, where you then immediately need to get on the brakes for turn 2, maybe even before the apex of 1, which makes this thing beautifully difficult. We've got some nice flow in this section at the bottom down into the hairpin of 12. It pains me to say it because you know how much I like to clown on Alpine, but I think this track might actually be okay. Just okay, mind you, not great. It is still a bit repetitive, and it's all straights, which can get boring after a few laps. If the Alpine logo was more curvy along these long sections, we could have had something amazing here. But sadly, for the French team, it is just okay. We kick things off then, not A or S tier, but also nowhere near as bad as it could have been. I'm sticking Alpine in B. Considering the last video started out with several F tiers, does this mean the team logos are all going to make decent tracks? No. Aston up next, and when you turn the outline of this logo into a track, wait a minute. Is that Montreal? If you squint hard enough, it definitely looks a bit Canadian. Ugh. But while Aston reminds me of some of the great features of that track, it is lacking some of the detail and variety. We start the lap off with this weird little 5 apex switchback, which would be fun to watch, but less fun if you are in fact a driver's spine. Then, a nice little kink in this straight before follow through straight into the braking zone for 10. Some interesting track ideas so far then, but the circuit to Aston loses marks as it runs out of ideas and simply repeats all of that in reverse. I do like this thing at the end of the lap, which to me looks like a double Wall of Champions chicane. Never hurts to have more of a good thing. And so, while it could do with more variety, I do like some of the ideas Aston is putting forwards. It feels wrong to put this any lower than Alpine, but there just aren't enough interesting ideas to put this any higher either. Therefore, Aston Martin is going in B tier. Ferrari up next, and I think you see where this is going. It's been all fun and games so far with everyone hanging out in B tier. The fun stops now. When I turn this into a track, obviously, it wouldn't be Ferrari if you couldn't make out the horse. But my god, does the horse make for a horrible open wheel track. There are some interesting sections to this track. I like the front hoof complex, I like the tail complex. That's about it. Sadly, the good parts are mixed in with some horrible parts, such as this slalom up the main. Ferrari heard that you like maggots and Becketts, so they've made maggots and maggots and maggots and maggots and maggots and Becketts. Not quite as catchy, is it? Overall, this track has so many corners that I gave up on labelling all of them, instead doing every 5th one. This track, in total, has 72 corners! As a special stage in WRC, yeah, sure. But as a Formula 1 track, Ferrari have made one of the worst things I have ever seen. F tier. Haas next, and I hope you like circles. You know what? I kinda do. While this looks incredibly complicated, it actually has less corners than Jeddah or Singapore. And if you follow the racing line around the Haas ring, it has some really nice flow. Turn 1 is basically 130R into a slow 2-3 to give some overtaking opportunities. Turns 4 and 5 are nice once again, and there's opportunity for revenge, as cars who are overtaken into turn 2 can potentially get their own back down into the braking of turn 4. I really like the 10 to 13 complex, particularly as 12-13 has this very interesting profile due to the flick on the cross of the H, which makes the line extra spicy. And then, of course, we have to mention big circles. Now, I don't know whether this would be good or bad, because strangely, we don't have any real life tracks with big circles as far as I know. If this was flat, it would be a left-hand side tyre killer, an absolute nightmare for strategies and quali laps. Interesting for us the fans though. My other interpretation is that this is a banked ring, similar to the ones you get at vehicle test facilities, effectively allowing the cars to drive straight the whole way around them. It's an interesting way to get a 2 to 3 kilometre straight into your track if you have limited space, but I do see some issues as someone goes for an overtake and ends up flying out the top. Overall, as strange as the Haas ring looks, I can't actually find any fault with it. It's an oval with an infield section designed by a lunatic, and I love it. I'm sticking it in A tier. While the Haas track has a lot of ideas going on at the same time, it's kind of the opposite story with our next team, McLaren. Is this it, guys? You don't want to spend a little bit more time on the assignment? No? You're handing it in like this. Okay. I mean, what is there to say about this? It's good if you can't count past 4, I guess? Sadly, even in that case, you might be out of luck. As this track is so small and so short, you'd have to do something insane, like 120 laps to cover a full Grand Prix distance. That means 240 right-hand hairpins over the course of an hour and a bit. Does that sound like fun to you? The McLaren International Circuit is therefore the baby park of Formula 1. That is not a compliment. To give it some credit, I do like the curvy nature of it, and at the very least, it's not a rally stage. But there's just not enough to go on here. I'm going to have to stick this middle of the table in C tier. Who knows, maybe someone will make it for Assetto Corsa and it will turn out to be the best track of all time. Mercedes up next, and clearly they heard how much I like the Hassring because, sadly for Mercedes, this one is far less interesting than the Hassring, with only 8 corners and, not counting the big circle, only 3 different corner profiles. Honestly, in a modern Formula 1 car, I don't even think these would register as corners, so basically this is just a big circle with 2 hairpins. Wait a minute. It's just McLaren again. C tier for you, Mercedes, for just being a bit boring. Please, can we have a little more variety with the next track? That might be too much variety. In RB's defense, their ball is at least a little bit more simplified than Ferrari's horse, and so only has 49 corners, which is a real shame because I really like the first part of the track. 2, 3, 4, 5 is a nice variation on Farm Village and the Loop from Silverstone, and I don't know what you'd call this shape. Okay, well, I know what the comments will call this shape, but I've never seen a shape like this on a track before. I think it could be interesting. After turn 10 though, the RB track is way too windy, which makes overtaking impossible, average speeds too slow, and lap times far too long. Just all round bad. If this was in the driver logos track, I probably would have stuck this in F. But honestly, the bar is lower this time, and maybe if this was a huge long lap like the Nordschleife, it could still be entertaining. I wouldn't place any bets on it. I'm sticking RB in D tier, which I think they should be grateful for. But they're only here because Ferrari is so much stupider and there's something far, far worse to come. We then go from RB to RBR, and I mean, what am I to say? This is basically the same thing. I will say though that this is on the verge of greatness if the ball was massively smoothed out. This actually has a good level of variety and a nice mix of corner speeds. Low speed corners, high speed corners, dare I say it, medium speed corners. Alas, the Red Bull balls are not simple though, and so this has to be the official entry onto the tier list. It's basically just the same rating as RB, D tier. Because they can't figure out what the team is called, I'm leaving Sauber until the end, which means Williams is up next. Obviously, looking at the big Williams W, it is very angular and pretty repetitive. There is some corner speed variety though. I do really like the high speed turn 5, putting you off balance into the braking into 6, and as the middle points of the W are quite wide in the font, turns 2, 7 and 12 are these nice sweeping corners similar to maybe a spoon curve or maybe Tarzan from Zandvoort. This variety isn't enough to save it though. I know this is very similar to the Max Verstappen logo, which I rated very highly in A tier last video, but Williams just doesn't have the same magic, so I'm going to have to stick it in C tier, along with the other repetitive tracks of McLaren and Mercedes. And so our final team on the grid, Sauber. Kick Sauber? Stake F1 team Kick Sauber? It's just going to be Sauber for the sake of this video, and actually, if it was just Sauber using the timeless Sauber S, hang on a minute. Interesting curving to the straights? Check. Multiple different types of hairpins? Okay. Not only a big perimeter circle, but also this beautiful, massive, decreasing radius corner like a big brother of China Turn 2. You've got me interested. It's simple, yes, but in an elegant way. In lots of ways, this reminds me of Monza, which I've heard is an okay track. Sauber, therefore, is showing everyone how simplicity is done right, with the logo they designed over 30 years ago at this point. I'm hesitant to put it in S tier just because the big circle is untested, but I'm very, very confident sticking this in A tier. Oh, just excellent. However, as you know, Sauber is not just Sauber nowadays, and so we need to talk about the other logos. Firstly, Stake. They didn't spend too much time on this one, just picked a font and wrote Stake. Well done lads, hard day at the office that must have been. As we've seen before, any kind of lettering just does not work out great when turned into a track. This is no exception. Some positives, I guess. Turns 3 through 10 do look kind of interesting. 25 through 29 as well, if they were part of another track. And while there are some other interesting corner profiles, 42 corners is just not what we're looking for in a Formula 1 track. If you split this in half to just make the St layout, or perhaps just the Ake layout, maybe they could be good. But I get the feeling Stake want all of their logo to remain in one piece, and for that reason, F tier. The fun part about this, however, is that the Stake lettering is not the worst of the Sauber logos. There is one final design that we have to talk about, which shows up in countries where they can't advertise gambling: the Kick K. While other teams were using Adobe Illustrator or perhaps a pencil and paper to design their logos, Kick have taken the bold move to use the niche graphic design tool, Minecraft. This is a crime against my eyes. No one's favourite corner is a 90-degree bend, so why would you make a track that is only 90-degree bends? On moral grounds, I refuse to say anything positive about this track, out of the fear that some random American mayor may think it's a good thing to replicate this on their grid system city. It is not a good idea. Do not, under any circumstances, do this. Even though we've seen rally stage nightmares with over 70 corners, intricate sections that I'm not even sure a Formula 1 car can fit round, and tracks that are so simple they border on torture to watch, none of them are as bad as the Kick K. This is a crime of mundanity. And honestly, I would feel bad for Ferrari putting this in the same tier. Kick, therefore, have forced me to create an entirely new level of the tier list below F tier, below a fail. A place beneath the tiers, down through the 9 rings of hell. A place reserved solely for the most deranged, most degenerate, most unlovable creatures of this beautiful earth we live on. The Kick K is going in none other than F1 Twitter tier. And with that, our tier list is complete. Obviously, a little bit quicker this time, so there's only half as many teams as drivers. Let me know down below if you think all of these are in the right places, or have I been too harsh on some of them? You've probably seen these before. Racing cars is fun and all, but I've heard a rumour it can get a little bit expensive, and so Formula 1 has a whole host of sponsors to help, and, pun intended by the way, keep the wheels turning. You see their logos all around the tracks, then you also have the DHL Fastest Pit Stop Award, the Pirelli Pole Position Award, and also, Pirelli tyres, exclusively. Driver of the Day, sponsored by Salesforce, and the Crypto.com Overtake of the Month. But the ultimate advertising opportunity is, of course, to have your own Grand Prix. The Formula 1 Singapore Airlines Singapore Grand Prix. The Formula 1 Qatar Airways Qatar Grand Prix. The Formula 1 Qatar Airways British Grand Prix. I think you might have slightly missed the pattern here, Formula 1. The Formula 1 Aramco Gran Premio de España, and then, of course, everyone's favourite, the Formula 1 MSC Cruises Gran Premio del Made in Italy e dell'Emilia Romagna. It's obviously cool and all to be the title sponsor for a race so everyone will see your brand's name. But what if these brands wanted to take this one step further? What if they wanted to make a track in the shape of their logo so no one could ever forget it? Well, if they were to do that, whose logo would be best? My name is Mr. V, and in this video we're going to be adding official Formula 1 sponsors to our tier list to find out whose logo would make the best track. Now, I could have made a video of any company in the world, but if I chose a company, let's say Greggs, who's shown no interest in motor racing, well then it's a little rude for me to start roasting them on how bad their logo is as a track layout. I mean, of course, their Foursquare logo would be nasty as a track, but I'm not going to say that because they don't deserve it. Oh, wait. Official Formula 1 partners it is then, but I'm also going to be adding in another rule for this video to make sure the F tier doesn't get too full. No words. Most of these companies just have their name written out horizontally, which I understand from a recognition point of view, but obviously these make terrible tracks. Therefore, no Lenovo, even though they sponsor 2 Grands Prix, no official champagne supplier Ferrari, and even though their words are a bit more stylized, no DHL, and no big Pirelli P. I will, however, allow a logo which is a horizontal word next to a symbol, but I'm only going to count the symbol part, such as the star from our first logo onto this tier list, Heineken. Kicking the words out of their logo leaves us with a very simple 5-point star, which, yeah, unsurprisingly, pretty bad track. I don't have much to say about this one, really. It's very simple to the Mercedes logo from last time, but somehow with even less variety. You start off with a hairpin right into a follow-through left, into a hairpin right into a follow-through left. into a hairpin right. Repeat this 5 times per lap for who knows how many laps to get to full Grand Prix distance, and you have something closer to torture, or perhaps a Sisyphean eternal punishment than it is sport. I'm confident sticking Heineken in F tier to start our tier list off, which means it's all uphill from here. I mean, it's not like anyone else has made a star for their logo, because stars make terrible tracks. So thank God there's not even more stars coming up, because that would suck. This is called foreshadowing. Aramco is a Saudi Arabian national oil and gas company and the largest sponsor of Formula 1 in the last few years. And also Aston Martin. Now, as this is a graphic instead of a line drawing, I could have done this for their track. But that's not really in the spirit of the logo, is it? So instead, we have to look at this. Yeah, the square would have been better. If you squint, it's kind of like an oval with an infield, but they got the oval pretty wrong because it's, well, a square, and they got the infield very wrong. I don't know the exact answer to the question, how many hairpins is too many hairpins, but I'm pretty confident the answer is less than 19. To give it some credit, at least all the hairpins here are a little bit different. There is some variety as you go around this thing. But actually I just realised I don't want to give this any credit. This is awful. F tier. Okay, look. Please can we have no more stars? Stars do not make good tracks. No more stars and we can all move on with our lives. There's another star behind me, isn't there? It has even more points than before. We can get through this. We can get through this. MSC Cruises are the title sponsors of the Japanese and Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. And I suppose as it's a cruise company, you know, like on the sea, this is actually nautical themed, and so it's a compass rose and not a star. Still sucks though. 12 hairpins to the left, 12 hairpins to the right. Congratulations, you've just completed the lap of the MSC International Circuit. I'm really struggling for any positives to say to keep this balanced, guys. It's an efficient use of land area, I guess. This is revolting, vile, rotten, disgusting. I'm sure I don't need to tell you which tier this is going in. Just put it in the tier list and we can move on. Okay, who do we have next? Oh! Rolex. Okay, cool. They don't have a star. They have a crown as their logo, right? That's much better. It's just half a star. It's just half a star. In fairness, I do like this sweeping turn 20 between two straights, leading us into the start-finish straights. Could lead to some interesting battles as you cross the line. And then, this corner complex is interesting. Not good, just interesting. They obviously tried this out in Vietnam, but we never got to see a race there, so I don't actually know if it's good or not. I would, however, recommend that you only use this once per lap, not 5 times. However, that's exactly what Rolex have done. This track is highly repetitive again, not fun. Obviously, not as bad as the Stars, but in the grand scheme of things, still an utterly unacceptable track. F tier as well. Crypto.com sponsor the Miami Grand Prix and also the Overtake of the Month award, and finally, they've brought something that isn't a star. In our last videos, we explored the concept of the big circle, but Crypto have instead opted to bring us a big hexagon. Okay, trying something new. I will say the infield of this could do with some improvements. Each of these bubbles that make up the lion's face, and yes, it is a lion's face, I was surprised as well, could make an interesting corner complex, but I think one is enough. Doing it 3 times is just a bit extra. A bit too windy, a bit too stop-start. I think you can see from how awkwardly I had to cram in all the corner numbers, it's just too cramped in here. An improvement compared to the Stars then, and I do like the idea of the big hexagon. It reminds me of Turkey or Kota, but a lack of variety and repeating your corners is a sin which cannot go unpunished. Therefore, this is going down in D tier. So far then, this tier list is looking a little bottom heavy. These brands really aren't bringing their A game. It's almost like no one told them their logos are going to be turned into tracks, but I emailed them like 10 days ago. They had tons of time to change this. Anyway, please can we have a good logo? Please. We then head to a very strange logo, the Amazon arrow, here used as part of the AWS logo. It's famous for its simplicity, but will that simplicity translate into a good track? No. Amazon are the masters of saving costs, and they've saved cost here by just not adding any corners. It reminds me of Avis in a way, and I do love Avis for its ridiculousness, but it's important to note it was not a good track. This honestly looks like something Formula E would use, which once again, not a compliment, so I'm going to have to rate it pretty low. Not quite as grueling as the Stars, but equally as uninteresting as the Crypto.com Lion. Therefore, this is going in D tier as well. We then get onto 3 airlines that sponsor various races throughout the calendar. That makes sense, you know, Formula 1 is a global sport, and how do you get around the globe? In a big metal tube at 850 kph. Airlines are also normally quite stylish, sexy companies, the expensive ones anyway, so I'm hoping for something good from these guys. We start out with Qatar Airways and their Oryx. Now, obviously, this logo is stylized with all these horizontal strokes, which if I followed all of them would make a horrible track, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and draw this thing based on the spirit of the design. You know what? That actually kind of slaps. We see the return of the big circle, and actually this reminds me of the hash track in lots of ways. I really like everything that's happening from turns 1 through to 10. I think this could be a lot of fun to drive. Lots of passing opportunities too, which is always a big tick. It's not always sunny in Doha though, and this track does have some extra windy bits that I don't think would be very fun. The horns up here making turns 18 to 20 are also just a bit too much, adding too much unnecessary lap time. I think 1 would be okay, but 2 is an issue. I'm on the fence between B and C tier for this one, and while I can't know for certain until we make this thing in a sim and try it out, considering our tier list is so bottom heavy today, I'm going to put it in B, just to balance things out. Our next airline is Gulf, sponsor of the Bahrain Grand Prix, who have another animal as their logo, the Falcon. When I started making this, I was initially very hopeful, until I started to put the corner numbers on. 33 is a lot of corners, guys. However, it's not as bad as it seems. Lots of these corners are just Jeddah-style fast sweepers, which an F1 car can just take flat, and so actually, it's not as complicated as the numbers would suggest. The track is very Jeddah-inspired actually, just with some extra windy bits halfway along the 2 sides. The slow bits, like 12, 13, 14 here, are too slow, but I like the overall ideas. If this was smoothed out a bit, I could see this being good. Jeddah has proved to us that a track like this can be a lot of fun, even if it is stupid dangerous. In its current state though, I do think Gulf Airways has a bit of a flow issue, so I'm going to have to stick it in C tier. Our final airline is therefore Singapore, sponsor of, and you might want to sit down for the shock of this, the Singapore Grand Prix. They have another bird as their logo, but this time it's a lot more stylized and simplified. And this time, when we turn it into a logo, that simplification pays off, because this bangs. Excellent overtaking opportunities down into turn 2, very similar to Monza, where people fight through the Curva Grande and then overtake into the Della Roggia chicane. An overall high-speed layout, but a lot of variety thrown in due to the slow corners. This reminds me of Monza in a lot of ways actually, or maybe something like Las Vegas, which produced a great race the first time we went there. As good as it is though, I can't quite give this an S tier. It is maybe a bit too simple, and I'm really not a fan of this double chicane up at the top. 1 would be okay, you know, just to make the lap a little bit slower, but 2 is just unacceptable. It's good, therefore, but it's not perfect. I'm sticking Singapore Airlines in A tier, which you would think would make me happy, but I was just so hoping for an S tier. It's been 2 whole videos now since we've seen one. Mr. V needs an S tier. The animal logos of the airlines did work pretty well, but if only there was another sponsor with an animal logo, maybe even someone named after an animal, where the logo is simplified but still curvy and varied, maybe in the shape of, I don't know, a big cat. Everyone likes cats. I just can't think. What sponsor could possibly meet all of these requirements? It's no use. We're never gonna find it. We're stuck with these mid logos for the rest of our lives. Alright, who's next on the tier list? Singapore, Qatar. Puma is the official clothing sponsor of Formula 1 as well as some of the teams, and I think you know what we're gonna say. This absolutely bangs. Excellent corner speed variety, high speed corners, low speed corners. medium speed corners. We've got some inch cut bits, but they don't go on too long. And unlike other tracks, they're not just a series of hairpins, but rather some interesting switchbacks, which for some reason remind me of the swimming pool section at Monaco, i.e. the best section of Monaco. Overtaking opportunities down into 2 or 11, or even through the slow sections if you're feeling feisty. I also think this would be a great spectacle in qualifying, as it's one of those layouts that really separates the good drivers from the greats. Honestly, I'm struggling to see any negatives here at all. That might just be the rose-tinted glasses talking, as I'm so jaded by the rest of this tier list, but I think this could be the track that I've been searching for all these videos. It's not perfect, nothing is, and I'm sure a few of these corner profiles could be tweaked to make this even better, but I am sticking the Puma at the very top of our tier list, along with our Lord and Saviour Fernando Alonso in S tier. And with that, we're all out of logos. There are a couple other Formula 1 partners that do have little symbols in their logos, such as Globant, Salesforce, Paramount Plus, but spoilers, these suck as tracks. I hope you enjoyed this video, and a massive thank you to all of you for the huge support on this series so far. Let me know if you'd like to see another video in this series turning something else into tracks like, I don't know, driver faces. I didn't make this, by the way. This is a post on the official Puma Motorsport Instagram page, which they posted one day after my driver logos as tracks video. Suspicious. Formula 1 travels around the world and races on a host of tracks, all with their own unique design. But Formula 1 track design is a bit of a hot topic amongst the fandom, with people constantly discussing and complaining about different bits of layout across the calendar. It seems like every year F1 track owners are changing their layouts to keep racing at their venues interesting, but every time they make a change, are they overlooking an amazing piece of track design sat right under their very nose? My name is Mr. V, and it's my job to bring you answers to those Formula 1 questions you have at 2 AM, or maybe even the questions that the people at the top of Motorsport don't want you to know. It's a conspiracy, man. We've discussed which driver logos, team logos, and even Formula 1 sponsor logos will make the best track, but now I have something equally important to share with you. Which Formula 1 track logo would make the best Formula 1 track? And are any of them better Formula 1 tracks than the actual Formula 1 track? It makes sense, you get it. And also, yes, before we start, literally thousands of you have sent me the logos for the new Formula 1 rookies. I will be turning them into tracks very soon, don't you worry. Most Formula 1 tracks host more than just Formula 1 each year. They're basically companies that make money in a variety of ways, and so they have logos that they use for advertising on their websites. It makes sense. You may not be familiar with lots of these, unless you go to track days at these places or you're a massive nerd like me, but they do still exist. And so, would they make good tracks? These are pieces of design that the track owners already have all the rights to, and so next time they're digging up the tarmac to reprofile a corner, should they just stick these in instead? We're going to go through in 2025 calendar order and stick all these tracks onto our trusty tier list. And for this video exclusively, we might be able to crack out the highly sought after, is it better than the actual track board? As always, to keep things fair, each of these layouts is going to be clockwise. We're going to assume each of them is flat because anything is interesting on the side of a hill, and we're going to assume each of them is roughly average length for Formula 1 track, about 5.5 kilometers, unless the layout suggests otherwise. Let's get started. For 2025, back by popular demand, we start the season in Australia. Okay, Albert Park, give us something interesting to kick off the season. Seriously? You can't just use the track map. There must be at least one graphic designer in the whole country of Australia, but you've just downloaded the layout from Formula1.com and... This is probably a good time to mention that for this video, I'm adding a new tier. Didn't even try. Most of these tracks do have an actual logo, but some of them, Albert Park, thought they would be smart and just turn in their track map instead. I am not having it. Inter didn't even try with you, and obviously this makes them ineligible for the is it better than the actual track board because, well, it is the actual track. Next on the calendar is the Chinese Grand Prix at the Shanghai International Circuit, and I swear to God, but actually, wait, zoom, enhance. That doesn't look quite right to me. Bring in the actual track map. There's an imposter. Yes, Shanghai uses their track map as their logo, but they got it wrong. The snail is now too small, turn 6 has been widened to promote it into a medium speed corner, the perilous double left of 9 and 10 has been replaced by this coward's corner, and then the hairpin at the end of the straight has had the Botox treatment too to make it less aggressive on the brakes. Well, I guess as it's not the same as the actual track, we can still rate this. As this version is all smoothed out, lots of the braking zones have been reduced, and therefore the skill ceiling has been brought down as well. I do like the layout of the actual Shanghai International Circuit, but this version just looks like the cheap Temu knockoff. But even if this is not as challenging and has less corner variety than the actual Shanghai layout, compared to the other layouts in this video and in the previous ones, this is still a solid track, and so begrudgingly, I'm going to have to put it in A tier. Not entirely happy with this little loophole you found here, China. Maybe go away and get yourselves a new logo and don't copy your own homework next time. Up next is the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, and they have this very sexy, stylized version of their layout as their logo. See Albert Park in Shanghai? Suzuka did it well, but does this make a good track? It's a bit basic. To me, this looks like the layout at a cheap karting place. Compared to real Suzuka, the S's are gone. Dunlop, Degner, the hairpin and 200R are now all the same corner profile, and then 130R has been replaced by Baku Turn 3, which I'm sure I don't have to tell you is a crime. It does have a sort of Monza vibe in its simplicity, but even Monza is more varied than this. There's nothing exactly wrong about this, but there's nothing really right about it either. The prime example of a bland C-tier track. Next up is Bahrain at the Bahrain International Circuit, which has this as a logo. Still a track map, but even more stylized again. As a logo, I really like this, but as a track map, actually, you know what? I'm willing to hear them out on this one. The second straight has had this kink added, which I think would make a great spectacle, as cars are going to be going fast here. Also, might give people a more difficult off-balance braking point for turn 4. Okay. Turn 6 through 10 are familiar territory, and while I think we do lose something at what is now turn 11, look at what we gain at the end of this lap. This is a fast triple apex right, similar to Kota turn 16, 17, 18 on crack, because you're going to be arriving here about 180 miles per hour, making it similar to Austria turns 9 and 10. This is an amazing way to link two straights together, because it means if you want to make an overtake down into turn 1, you are going to have to clench. As you can tell, I'm getting a little bit excited about this track. I don't quite think it's S tier, but it's definitely a solid A, which brings us on to the question, is it better than the actual Bahrain International Circuit? I do genuinely think it's close. Both have some elements that are better than the other, but just for the sake of throwing some cats in amongst some pigeons, I'm going to say yes. It is. That's gonna be tough to beat, but is Jeddah Corniche up to the challenge? Their logo is a highly stylized JCC, I think, and as a track, it does give some interesting corner concepts. We've got a fast first sector with some heavy braking zones and a crossover, which I'm all for. But then we get to this. I don't hate this layout from 5 to 13, and I think watching a Formula 1 car do that many switchbacks in qualifying at least would be interesting. But this is too much. This looks like a layout you'd get in a street racing game if it's in a city with a grid system, but for Formula 1 it is too repetitive and just too slow overall. Not the worst track we've seen, by a long shot, but also not something I would like to see added to Formula 1. It's highly repetitive, it's too square, it's going in C tier along with Suzuka, and I think we can all agree not as good as actual Jeddah. Next, we head to our first American race of the year in Miami, who almost landed themselves in the didn't even try tier, but they have switched things up by adding this signature through the middle of their logo. While I wouldn't normally count the text, I don't really see a way to separate these, and so we get this. Ugh. You may notice the direction is reversed, as actual Miami is an anti-clockwise circuit. And then you may also notice these 13 hairpins which make up Sector 1. Is it an innovative piece of track design? Yes. Is it a good piece of track design? Well, if you like spinal injuries and nausea, yes. The rest of the track is kind of as you'd expect, but I will say that having this tight section after the long straight is definitely worse than real life. Just too awkward if people are trying to fight side by side after a slipstream overtake, not good. Way too many corners, horrible flow, crazy long lap times. The Miami International Circuit is our first of the day going in F tier for that Sector 1 alone. Our first trip to Italy for the year brings us to Imola. The logo for the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari used to look like this, which would have meant it got the Miami treatment, but they recently changed it, so now we have this. Removing these useless letters on either side gives us the track map in a circle. However, the eagle-eyed among you may notice this is the motorbike's layout with a chicane in the pitch straight, and combined with the big circle, it makes this different enough that it still counts. Turning this into a track, there's a lot to unpack here. Firstly, with or without the big circle, the circuit is reversed, as Imola is normally anti-clockwise. Secondly, the lap starts with this tiny run down into turn 1, which is kind of like Monza turn 1, but slower and therefore worse. Thirdly, due to the way the circle overlaps, we now have a huge ramp shooting out of the grass on the infield of what is now turn 3 and 4. And fourthly, big circle. I do think the actual Imola layout works quite nicely in reverse, minus the stupid bike chicane. It means we get to do some fun things like take Acqua Minerale in reverse, i.e. downhill. Not against that, but this massive circle is adding at least 30 seconds of boring lap time, and the exit from it is another chicane, bringing the total to this layout for 4, which is too many chicanes. All we've done here is take regular Imola and made it worse, so this is not going too high on the T list. I'm thinking D tier. Continuing the European leg of the season, we now come to Monte Carlo, the Monaco Grand Prix. Surely, the exotic Circuit de Monaco must have a beautifully crafted logo, come on. This one is the same as the actual layouts. Obviously it's going in the didn't even try tier along with Albert Park. But while I was looking at this, I couldn't help but wonder something. If we assume this is average Formula 1 track length, somewhere between 5 and 6 kilometers, instead of the 3.3 kilometers of the actual Monaco circuit, how would that change things? Stretching everything out here about 1.6 times its original length does bring some welcome changes. The main straight gains about 300 meters, increasing the chance of an actual overtake. The minimum speed of the hairpin basically doubles if we assume the track gets a bit wider as well, and having a wider track and cars with a bit less wing angle means cars can actually get a bit closer together around here. We might see some racing. I think I might have found a fix for Monaco, guys, and all we have to do is shift everything apart by a couple hundred meters. It would mean relocating a little bit of real estate, couple €100 million worth, including the iconic 19th century opera house and casino, and we would have to widen the harbour, again with an estimated cost of hundreds of millions, if not billions of euros, but I think we can all agree that is worth it if we get a couple more overtakes. As this layout is exactly the same as real life, it is not eligible for the Is It Better board, but rest assured, if it was, and if this was normal Formula 1 track length, absolutely. Yes. Monaco is followed by the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya, whose logo... Get in the lazy tier, go on. The Spanish Grand Prix is followed by the Canadian Grand Prix at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, but I've got a bit of an issue with this one. It doesn't have a logo. I've trawled through photographs of the event in previous years, the website for the park, other track information sites, nothing. A Google search for this does bring up this icon, but this is actually just from Assetto Corsa, and as it's a generic track map with a word anyway, it wouldn't count. This is going to have to be our first not applicable entry on the list, but never fear. Our next track, the Red Bull Ring, very much does have a logo, and oh boy, where do we start? As a logo, I do like this. It's very Red Bull. It's obtuse and a bit goofy, but still respectable enough to be a serious corporate logo. I'm going to be relaxing my no words policy for this one because it's all words, but I do think the ring part of it is stylized enough that it takes on a new meaning, so I'm going to let it in. And also I let in Jeddah, which is just 3 letters, and also Shanghai, which is based off the Chinese character Shang, so I've got to be fair. The fact that some of this has volume and some doesn't did give me a bit of an issue in making the track, and the only way around it was to take the original layout part normally, but then to outline the rest of the letters, giving this abomination of a track. I don't mind the idea of the Red Bull Ring with a bit of an extension, but it's tight, it's windy, it's got too many hairpins. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of that bit in the middle of Baku where the high-speed streets link up with the castle section, you know, the awful part of Baku. It's like that, but a lot more of that. In previous videos, I probably would have been more lenient on this and put it in D tier, because it does have some corner variety, but no. I get incredibly sad thinking about a car going round here, F tier, and obviously not better than the original. The last track before a short summer break this season is Silverstone, and for the first time we have a logo that's just an abstract thing. No words, no track outline, just this. To clarify, I'm not saying it's bad at all. It's simple and distinctive and does everything it needs to do as a logo. I found this post from the designers agency TK on Behance, which says it comes from an element of the British flag, which I think is a nice touch for a very British place. That post did also show some merchandise examples, and Silverstone, you're going to be hearing from my lawyers, MrVsGarage.com. But will this sleek, flag-inspired logo make a good track? Caesar's Palace, welcome back to Formula 1. Which is to say, no, it doesn't start out bad. The follow-through of 1 into the hard braking of 2 is kind of like the start of Imola or Sochi, which is not a bad thing at all. And then corners 3 and 4 are fine, but then... This is not good. This feels like going down every lane of a massive car park trying to find that one remaining space. Not exactly a thrilling racing experience. And also, it's just a bit basic. You've got your normal corners, then you get your whiplash, and then you're done. Basic, uncomfortable, disgusting. F tier, and clearly worse than the original. Belgium is next on the tier list, and let me tell you, the era of the track outline logos is finished, because this is what Spa is bringing to the table. Oh boy. Now, I could have traced around the outside of these squares, but I realized the intention of the designers here was obviously this. I hope you like bridges. Now, despite only having one corner angle, I've got to give Spa some props for varying things up with the straight lengths and also the size of the corner complexes. 1, 2, 3 and 7, 8, 9 have very different vibes despite being almost exactly the same. I do think this would be a lot of fun to drive in, say, a go-kart, but for Formula 1 it is way too repetitive, with the first and last 6 corners being repeated. On our tier list, I think it sits somewhere between C and D tier because it's more repetitive than Suzuka, but not as torturous and long as something like Imola. I'm going to be nice and stick it in C tier. To the Hungaroring next, and whoa, okay. I like a bold font choice, but that is bold. This is the part we'll be trackifying, and I'd like to know down below what you think this is. To me, it looks like a stylized TG, but I have no idea why. I can't find any connection between the track and those two letters. It's not like it has a different name in Hungarian, it's always just the Hungaroring, so why? Let me know what you think down below, because honestly, this is one of the great mysteries of Formula 1 2025. Whatever it may be, when we turn this into a track, we actually get something pretty interesting. A fast-flowing Sector 1, 2 long straights, each with a naughty dive bomb opportunity at the end, a technical middle sector with some corner variety, and unlike the Jeddah circuit, it doesn't outstay its welcome. I actually really like this track. It reminds me of Zandvoort, or maybe even the Hungaroring. I don't think it's better than the actual layout, but I do think it's a high B, low A tier kind of placement, so just to even things out, I'm going to stick it in B tier. Considering this one is not based on an actual track, it's very respectable. Zandvoort next, and initially I thought they had been lazy and based this off a track map with some words on top, but then I realised this is actually based on a photo, and the skewed perspective makes turns 1, 2, 3 look a little bit shriveled. It's a cold day in the Netherlands, clearly. The most sensible way to turn this into a track is obviously just to follow the outline of the whole thing, including the nameplate. It gives us something similar to original Zandvoort, but with the Lesmos from Monza transplanted into Sector 3. The first few corners are obviously tighter than real Zandvoort, but to even things out, turns 5 through 9 have then been smoothed out to speed things up. We gain some tight hairpins in the middle sector to slow things down again, but then, you know, I'm not against having the Lesmos here to speed things up once more. I do wish turn 16 went straight to turn 19 without this stupid chicane in the middle. It's kind of ruining the flow at the end of the lap. But there's some solid ideas here to push the low speed and high speed extremes of this track and make it more akin to somewhere like Baku. I don't think the overall flow of this is as good as real Zandvoort, so it's not going on the Is It Better board. But I don't mind it. It's not amazing, but it is a solid B tier. Monza next. It's another track map, but wait a minute. Monza, I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but your track doesn't look like this anymore. This logo appears to be based on a layout used from the mid-50s to mid-60s with the combined road course and oval. And so turning it into a track gives, well, that same thing. This layout was tried and tested with actual Formula 1 cars, so you'd think it would score highly, but don't know if you know this, Formula 1 has changed ever so slightly since the 1960s. Monza is already full throttle 84% of the time, but this layout would see drivers stamping their right foot into the carpet something like 96% of the time. That's more than lots of ovals. What we've got here is basically an oval with some extra steps, but apart from turns 4 and 5, they're all right turns instead of left, and so Americans will still have no idea how to drive it. I do like oval racing, but it's not what Formula 1's about. I think it'd be interesting to see one race here for science, but overall I think the racing would be a little bit stale, and so this is going with our other tracks are a bit stale in C tier. We're done with Europe as we now head over to Azerbaijan and the Baku City circuit, which has this logo. From a graphic design perspective, love it. Simple, bold, little cheeky checkered flag homage, absolutely cooked. As a track, on the other hand, did not cook, mate. That's not even passing its food hygiene rating. A lot of crossovers, a lot of bridges, similar then to Spa, but with this triple hairpin thing, which actually reminds me of, Caesar's Palace. Welcome back to Formula 1. I do think one of these would make an interesting corner complex, but repetition is the enemy here. I do also like this 16, 17, 18 as I think it gives an interesting racing line. And I can't deny that seeing cars going up and down these long straights while other cars go underneath and over the top would be an interesting spectacle on TV. I'm convinced myself this is good, that's bad. This track is very stupid. But then again, it has a sort of charming novelty that I just can't get away from. No, it's too stupid. On balance, I'm going to stick it in C tier, along with the other repetitive tracks, but I would like to ask that this bulbous double curve of 16, 17, 18 be added to another track somewhere. No idea why I like it so much, something about its bulbous shape, I guess. Singapore next at the Marina Bay Street Circuit, and I initially thought we were going to have another Canada situation here, as it was really looking like this place does not have a logo. A Google search gave me nothing. There is no website for the track. The website for the event doesn't have anything and just has a track map as the favicon. I was stumped until I scrolled down to the bottom of this webpage and I found this. Now, I can already hear you saying, actually, that's the logo for the event, not the circuit. It's all we've got. It's all we've got. Turning this into a track gives us something that, to me, looks a lot like an actual track. It's got some corner variety, it's got some organic shapes. It's a very convincing cosplay of a circuit, but what it doesn't have is anything interesting. This looks more like a MotoGP track to me, with lots of wide, medium speed corners and a distinct lack of anything slow and technical. It reminds me of something like Lusail, which, let me tell you, is not a good thing for Formula 1. Am I being too harsh on this one? Maybe, just because it looks like an actual track and so could have been so much more. Its overall bulbousness makes it track-like, but in a way holds it back, and so I'm going to have to stick it in B tier. It's fine. It's fine. Maybe the MotoGP maniacs will love it. Who knows? The US Grand Prix next at the Circuit of the Americas, which has this logo. Oh boy, we're back in garbage territory. Formula 1 heard that you like long straights into hairpins, and so they thought, hey, why not only have long straights into hairpins? The only redeeming quality here is that the straights are not straight, because, you know, I quite like this run from 5 into 10, but make no mistake, this is awful. My main issue here is this looks too much like something a track designer would actually try. The other bottom tier tracks, they're very silly, but this looks quite a lot like Jeddah, and so I could see Formula 1 management trying to spoon feed us this garbage in a few years' time. I'm taking a stand against this and putting it in a tier below didn't even try, which I'm calling don't try. And that's a threat. Obviously, far worse than Real COTA as well. Get that thing away from me and bring me something nicer. That is not nicer. To be clear, I do like the logo for Hermanos Rodriguez. It's simple, but it tells a story. It's a eagle, falcon. It's a bird. It's a bird. Okay, nice. But turning it into a track. Caesar's Palace. Welcome back to Formula 1. Clearly, Hermanos Rodriguez has been copying COTA's notes from the track design lecture, where COTA wrote down long straights and hairpins and then fell asleep. The start of the lap until turn 6 is decent. It's got some fast flowing corners into the hard braking of turn 3, and then some opportunity for cars to fight side by side. Then the goodness ends though. This is not fun, Hermanos Rodriguez. Why did you do this? Very unfun once again, but thankfully I can't see anyone actually trying this one, so we can just quietly pop it down into F tier and all move on to something nicer. Actually, what are we doing here? Okay, so the logo for Interlagos is just the track map for Interlagos 7 times. Just sort of randomly placed on top of each other. Yeah. The most sensible way to turn this into a track is just to trace around the outside, which gives us... If you've ever seen the layout of tracks from the very early days of Formula 1, they often look something like this. This is because they were just random roads in the countryside in Europe, and so they often made something that was very lumpy. Think original Spa, for instance. The problem is, assuming this is the same size as normal Interlagos, none of these lumps are big enough to even phase a modern Formula 1 car. And so this is flat, all of this is flat, and also, what have you done with the Senna S's? I do like the line from 3 to 7 here, so wouldn't mind adding this to another track, but other than that, this is just an oval with an infield and then this horrible chicane of 11-12, which I can't imagine anyone would like. This is obviously not as good as actual Interlagos, but I have to say the racing line here is fine. It's fine. It's very simple once again. The infield only has 4 corners, but unlike lots of the other tracks in this tier list, it's not aggressively trash. And so actually, I am going to stick it up in B tier. Didn't see that one coming, did you? Las Vegas, once again, does not have a logo. You can make the argument it's just city streets and so doesn't need one, but Baku made a logo. Baku did it, Las Vegas, why can't you? Are you saying you're lazier than Baku? Certainly what it looks like. Qatar up next, a track which I don't like at all for Formula 1, and so the logo does have a decent chance of getting onto the Is It Better board. Oh no. Well, obviously I can't allow this, it's just words. But then again, I did let the Red Bull Ring and Jeddah in. Gotta be fair. Okay, here goes nothing. We're gonna turn it into a track nice and slow. Nice and slow. No! Ah! Ah! No! Go back! It's too many corners! Do not put the numbers on this. Similarly to the Ferrari crash track, I didn't see the point in labeling every corner here, but also I couldn't label every 5 because some of them were in such awkward places, so I just labeled some of them. I labelled some of them, okay? You would have done the same thing in my position. Don't look at me like that. 81 corners in total to round off maybe the worst track layout I have ever seen. At least the Ferrari crest had some interesting bits. This has nothing. I really don't want to talk about this anymore. Just having this thing near me is making me feel violently unwell. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to really soak this whole thing in, and then it's going away forever, okay? Okay. Right, good. Now that's over with.
It goes in F tier.
Our season finale obviously takes place in Yas Marina, which has this big Yas as a logo. We let in other words, okay? Come on. The top of the A is disconnected, and so it's obviously a separate national layout. But turning the rest of this into a logo gives us this, and I don't hate it. Yes, it has too many corners, and yes, it goes on a little bit too long, but all the ideas are there. It's got a very classic motorsport layout. You've got the long pit straight, you've got a back straight, some windy bits at either side. It makes me think of somewhere like Bahrain or maybe Catalonia when I look at this. It could do with some tidying up, but I like these fast sections with the sweepers of 8, 10 and 12. I think turns 14 and 15 make an interesting corner profile at the end of a long straight. Some minor safety concerns if someone's brakes fail here, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The long right of 19 is nice, into the simple yet challenging 20 and 21. This isn't terrible. It makes me think of how the 2010 Bahrain Grand Prix was run on the endurance layout there. It's an awful layout, yes, but just by removing a few corners, you can actually get something decent. And it's the same story here. Cut out the 4, 5, 6 hairpin, make the straight from 15 go straight through to 18 without the chicane in the middle, maybe bring 22 in a bit just to shave some lap time off. With some work, this could be an amazing track, but it does have some flaws currently. But then again, so does the actual Yas Marina track, mainly in this area, and so it's hard to judge which one is better. The recent track has been improved in recent years by adding a satisfying medium speed corner. But then again, the logo track has multiple satisfying medium speed corners. The real track has a couple opportunities for an overtake, but it struggles with cars getting stuck in a DRS train. But the logo track has multiple overtaking opportunities. A dive bomb into 1, a dive bomb into 15, a dive bomb into 16, no front wing is safe. On the tier list, I'm sticking this in B tier. But considering the real track is also no better than B tier, I'm really struggling to decide if it goes on the Is It Better board. You know what, just so Bahrain doesn't get lonely, I am going to add it in, on the condition that they add my notes on how to tweak it a little bit. You may not have seen these before. Almost every driver in Formula 1 has their own logo, which they use on their helmet, merchandise, things like that. Last year, I went through the 2024 grid and ranked everyone's logos to see how good they were as tracks. But annoyingly, in 2025, we have 6 new rookies bringing with them new logos and completely screwing up my tier list. So today we're putting Antonelli, Behrman, Doohan, Hadjar, Bortoleto and Liam Lawson on blast as we add each of their logos to the trusty tier list. These guys have brought a nice range of stuff for us, from some pretty generic driver initials all the way up to the Behrman Bear and Liam Lawson with the strangest logo we have ever seen. My name is Mr. V, a guy with a Photoshop subscription, an unhealthy obsession with track maps, and way too much free time. Let's see which of these rookies' logos is best. As always, to keep things fair, we assume each of these tracks is clockwise, we assume each of them is flat, and we assume each of them is about the average length for a Formula 1 track unless the layout suggests otherwise. Who's up first? What the hell? He's not a rookie. Okay, so we'll get onto the rookies in just a second, but first we do have some updates to the tier list. While Charles Leclerc is very much not new to Formula 1, his logo for 2025 is. Charles previously had this, which as a logo, I quite like. It looks like a sports clothing brand, which is pretty fitting if you're putting it on, well, sports clothing. But for this year, he's gone back to the drawing board and come up with this. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Mixed up my images. That's the logo for Polestar. Charles Leclerc has come up with this. Might need to get a lawyer, Charles. This new logo is an element of his initials and driver number combo, CL16, but he's dropped the C and the 6 to just leave L1. Is this Charles Leclerc manifesting his future in the number 1 car? Anyway, turning this into a track gives us a pretty simple, pretty repetitive track with a hairpin into a double left, over a bridge, and then the same again in reverse. The proportion of this track makes it very silly, with each of these long straights being just over 1 kilometer in length, i.e. the Shanghai back straight twice. If you're a fan of DRS trains, you're going to love this place. And while you would get some overtakes with some dive bombs at the end of the straights, the rest of the racing here is going to be pretty boring, pretty repetitive. Overall, I'm thinking C tier. Right, okay, now we've cleared that out the way, let's get on to some actual rookies. Who do we have up first? Okay, I see how this is going. These are the last 2 before the actual rookies, I promise. Neither of these guys have a new logo for 2025, but both of them have more than 1 logo. I've reviewed one layout for each of Tsunoda and Ocon, but some of you in the comments have been asking to see their other logos, and so here we go. Firstly, Tsunoda's whatever this is logo is not as interesting as his leaf motif, which he uses for his merchandise. But I guess in theory, this one is his driver logo, and so should have been the one I trackified before. While this is simple once again, with the first half just repeated in the second half, it does have more corner variety than Charles Leclerc's. I quite like this follow through between turns 1 and turn 2, which you will notice I haven't given a corner number 2, Red Bull Ring, Imola, Jeddah, Gilles Villeneuve, Baku. We do have a good mix of corner speeds around here, with some low speed corners, high speed sections, medium speed, but repeating the first half of the lap in the second half is a cardinal sin, which means we can't put this thing too high up on our tier list. I'm thinking low B tier for this logo, which I can't help but shake the feeling reminds me of something. One of the other logos we looked at already. Whose was it? Ah, I see it now. It looks like Pierre Gasly's. You two can't keep you apart, can we? Together forever, just you and me. Heartwarming. Esteban Ocon's logo track, on the other hand, not heartwarming. I couldn't be bothered to cram all of the corner numbers into this thing, but you can take my word for it that, ironically, it has 31, and none of them should ever be driven by a Formula 1 car. Long, windy, slow, tedious. You have done a bad thing, Esteban, and you should feel bad. No song for you. This thing is going straight down into D tier. Okay, I can now confirm we are onto the actual rookies for 2025. We're going to go through these guys in reverse Constructors' Championship order, which means we start with Bortoleto at Sauber.
Gabriel Bortoleto.
Bortoleto has gone for the signature gambit with his logo, a play which normally ends with either a banger track or an affront to God. Thankfully for Bortoleto, his Winged Bee gives us a track which actually looks kind of like a real track you might see. We do still have some fiddly tight corners like the hairpin up at turn 3, but the overall volume of this thing gives us some nice high-speed sections near the end of the lap and some interesting longer corners like turn 2 or turn 8. I do think this track is a little slow and windy overall. It's got a few too many chicanes. We could definitely do without the 15-16 chicane and maybe take away turn 7 and just go straight into turn 8, but overall it's got some nice ideas executed sort of fine. I'm going to tentatively stick this thing up in B tier, but if we ever make it in a sim and try it out, all these chicanes might end up sinking it down into a C. Isaac Hadjar up next, and he brings probably the most generic of all the rookie logos. Wow, your initials written in italics, Isaac. Never would have thought of that for a racing logo. As a track, we do get something pretty plain, as it is just initials. Lots of almost 90-degree corners repeated multiple times at the corners of all the letters. We do have some variety of these cutout bits, but then again, it's all hairpins. 4 hairpins. Really, Isaac? That is far too many hairpins. Other than that, I don't really have anything to say about the Hadjar Auto Center. There is just nothing interesting about this track. There's nothing I hate about it, but I just kind of feel empty when I look at this thing. I'm thinking low C tier for this one, and I'm really hoping that our next rookie can bring something more unique. Well, it's certainly unique. I do appreciate the Bearman Bear, as it's doing something different. Not afraid to stand out, is our Ollie. Is it a good logo? This is incredibly specific, but to me, it looks like the logo for a company that makes niche sporting equipment. I'm thinking American football tackle dummies. But as a track, how does this logo shape up? This thing is obviously a bit more complex than the logos we've seen previously, so I've used the biggest bit as the outline for a track while making sure that you can clearly see the difference between the O and B side cheeks. I am not an expert on bear anatomy. 34 corners around here is too many, but we do have some very interesting sections. The lap starts with a Sepang style double straight. Don't hate that, into a Maggots and Beckett's inspired section. After a little hairpin complex, we get another Maggots and Beckett's inspired section, and then towards the end of the lap, we get Ollie, you need to try something different. Well, actually, hold up. Maybe he doesn't, because I do get the feeling that these sections would be a lot of fun to drive. If we shorten this overall thing up, maybe getting rid of the B-side cheek, this place would be a banger track. In its current form, though, a bit too long. A few too many hairpins. With some tweaks, this place could be an A-tier track, but as it stands, it's a bit tedious to drive. Therefore, I'm thinking C-tier. Jack Doohan is up next with a pretty sleek logo to once again show off his initials, J-O. Wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. Whatever letters this may be, I do really enjoy it as a logo. It looks kind of like a modern streetwear clothing brand. Pretty sleek, I like it. As a track, it very much follows the classic formula of long straight along one side and then some windy bits up above, in the style of Barcelona or maybe Bahrain. It does have some good corner sequences. The opening to the lap from turns 1 through to turn 5 is pretty nice, similar to something like Zandvoort. But after that, this track kind of falls down by being too tight. We've got a hairpin, a sort of hairpin, hairpin, hairpin. What is it with all these rookies and hairpins? I do think we could get some fun racing here, but a few extra corners in the middle of the lap to up the average speed and add some variety would have gone a long way. And it still sort of says J-O or whatever the hell he was going for. Kinda mid then compared to the other logos for Jack. I'm thinking B tier.
Andrea Kimi Antonelli.
In theory, Andrea Kimi Antonelli is up next, but we have a problem. he doesn't have a logo. He does have this typography thing which shows up on some of his helmet designs, but we all know the #1 rule of logo tracks: no words. If he had gone with the stylized AKA, we could have done something with it, but as per the rules of the video, the Mercedes Wunderkind has to be disqualified. Hopefully, Andrea sees the error of his ways and opens up Adobe Illustrator at some point during this year. Okay, so we've had initials and we've had a full-blown cartoon bear. Surely one of our rookies has to bring something normal to the table. Just a regular piece of graphic design that fits in with the rest of the grid and doesn't look too out of place in the high-class setting of Formula 1. Liam Lawson is up next, and he's been around the paddock more than the rest of them. Surely he should know how to bring something that fits in, right? What is this? Okay, no, jokes aside, I do quite like this. I've always been a fan of doing something a bit differently, standing out, and well, this certainly stands out. I'd love to see more drivers going down the route of Lawson or Bearman and doing something more personal with their logo. It is way more interesting than just another set of initials. Now, that being said, I don't love everything about this. I don't love that the entire design has a thick black outline, including this piece of hair, but then this piece of hair doesn't. I don't love the fact that the face is a cartoonish pure white, but then the hair is a very natural blonde colour. It's kind of uncanny. Would have preferred if it was just bright yellow or something. But these issues in mind, it's a thumbs up from me for this logo. But what about this track? As with Bearman's, I've had to lose some of the details of this thing when converting it, but I've kept the overall vibe of the design. Sort of. It does now look like an oval with a sketch of a roller skate in the middle, but I've never seen a rule saying you can't have that. This is very much an oval with an infield, which many ovals do. But this one also has an outfield, which makes it a little bit more rare. And speaking of that outfield section, I don't mind it. It probably would be better if the apexes for turns 11 through 14 were all a bit closer together to improve the flow as you make your way through here, but it's an interesting idea which gives the track a lot of character. And actually, character is one thing that this track is certainly not lacking. I really like this long right like a Barcelona turn 3 onto the second half of the oval. Gives us a nice bit of separation between people on good and bad tyres, or just people with good and bad lines through there, and really spices up the racing. I like that this oval section ends with a big old spoon corner rather than just another chicane. I like these big bulbous lefts of turns 3 and 6. You know what? I think I kind of like this track. It is goofy, much like the logo it's based on, but like the logo it's based on, I'm all for it. This might be a controversial placement, but I'm going to put the Lawson Park up into A tier, as I do think we'd get some very interesting racing around here. And on top of that, it's just got pizzazz. One final driver we have to mention in this video, someone who is not currently on the grid, but many believe will show up before this season is over, is Franco Colapinto. Now, while researching for Colapinto's logo, I did find his website, and I have to say, it is beautiful. We've got some lovely photo edits, we've got this picture of Franco being Thanos snapped, we've got the slogan, "Only One Again," which I've been thinking about, and I've come to the conclusion, yeah, nah, that's complete gibberish. With all this style going on the website, I've got some high hopes for a very sexy logo from the young Argentinian. Alright, let's see what he's... Bruh. You've probably seen these before, I hope. Formula 1 is a world championship, and as such races all around the world in various different countries. 21 this year to be exact. My name is Mr. V, and I've made a few videos at this point discussing all different logos associated with Formula 1 and which of them would make the best tracks. And underneath every single one of those videos, by far the most popular comment is asking me to give the same treatment to countries. Now, some of you may have seen that a couple years ago Tomo travelled back in time and copied this video. You know what? That's understandable. This is a very good video, and Tomo, I forgive you. I highly recommend you check out his video, but after you do that, you should probably come back here, because in his one, he talks about 10 popular countries in Formula 1, but in this video, we're looking at every race on the 2025 calendar. That is right, we are looking at which Formula 1 host country would make the best track. and also some things that aren't countries. As always, we're going to be trackifying these countries with a few rules. As standard, we assume each of these places is flat, we assume each of them goes clockwise, and we assume all of them are average length for a Formula 1 track, just to keep things unbiased. But then we need some special rules if we're talking about countries. Firstly, some countries have been very unhelpful and split themselves up into separate pieces separated by water, which they apparently call islands. There are no Formula 1 track design regulations for jumping over water, so we need to figure something out here. Do we consider every island as part of the main block of the country, or do we exclude everything that's floating out in the sea? I've decided we'll go somewhere in the middle and give every country the squint test. Basically, if the islands look joined up when you squint at them, they get to stay in. But if they still look separate, they're going in the bin. That means Japan will be keeping all of its major islands, Shikoku, Kyushu, and Hokkaido, but the United Kingdom will be losing Northern Ireland. I mean, geographically speaking, it looks like it should be part of the Republic of Ireland anyway. Hope that's not a controversial political statement. Should probably look that one up. 1 second. Well. Then secondly, we need to decide how many corners each country has. As I found out recently, the borders of different countries can get pretty long. Over the length of that border, they can get bendy when you zoom in. And I get the feeling that a track with hundreds of thousands of corners is going to be a little bit tedious, so we need to simplify them somehow. But how do we do that fairly? Using the UK as an example, I could trackify it like this, or like this, or like this. But as a Formula 1 fan, some of these options feel... So, as a completely arbitrary rule, I have decided that every country will be limited by the number of corners that its actual track has, so the UK can have no more than 18 corners, the same as Silverstone. Now, I would like to note, this is a rule that I regretted immediately when I started making these tracks. That's all the rules we need to design these things, and so let's get to it and get them all up on the tier list. And we might be able to crack out the is it better than the actual track board. Right, 24 tracks, 21 countries. Time to head to the airport. I'm not actually going to the airport. The budget for this video went on my Adobe Photoshop subscription so I could make the track outlines. And speaking of, let's kick this thing off where the actual 2025 season started, in Australia. The Australian Grand Prix takes place at Albert Park, which has 14 corners, and so the map of the country turns into something like this when we make it a track. Okay, you know what? I think we might be starting out strong for once. Nice corner speed variety. We start the lap off down this big bendy straight, carrying a lot of speed into the Melbourne curve before we get to the very technical Adelaide chicane. We then have some unique corner profiles up on the north coast. I think this section from 12 to 14 would be a pretty good challenge, trying to carry as much speed as possible to maximize the pit straight. Lots of it has some nice flow, but that being said, I do think the tight sections here are a bit too tight, particularly the chicane at 2 and 3, and the rest of the lap looks pretty prone to the dirty air problems that plague so many other tracks in Formula 1. I do think there could be some overtaking opportunities down at 5 or maybe 7, and you know, even if you can't fight someone along the north coast, it is still an interesting challenge, so I think any given lap here would be quite fun to watch. I think this could score quite highly. I'm thinking high B tier for Australia, near the boundary for A, but not quite over it, sadly. And while this thing is decent, it is not as good as the actual Albert Park layout, and so the Is It Better board is staying in storage for now. Next up is China, which can't have any more than 16 corners, and so the country turns into something like this. An interesting mixture of corner complexes separated by these huge sweeping flat out sections of the Himalaya Strait, the Mongolia Bend, and the Shanghai Curve. And no, before you ask, these things do not get corner numbers. Do not question my track maps. I do love the start to this lap. A tight turn 1, which is bound to see some action at the start of the race. A couple S's, and then a run into another couple off throttle S's up in the northwest, which just have a beautiful flow over a single lap. The slipstream opportunities down the flat out sections also mean that fights can continue for basically the entire first half of this lap. Nice. My only concern with the Chinese track is this nonsense down by Beijing. You had a good thing going, China. What is this? Turn 11 would be okay in isolation, but 4 extra slow corners in a row just means this section would feel bad. It's a bit of a shame then flow-wise, but I do still think that this track gives excellent overtaking and fighting opportunities. And so, despite the Beijing blah, I am going to stick China up in B tier once more. I think it's the bendy straights that did it for me. I love a straight that's not quite straight. Don't read into that sentence. And also, while this is good, I would say that final sector means it's not quite as good as the actual Shanghai International, so nothing is going on the is it better board just yet. Japan gives us something a little bit different, with its long, narrow chain of islands giving us a thin track with lots of unique bends. Hang on a second. We've just made Jeddah again. It's not exactly like Jeddah though. The lap starts with a high-speed section down into the Kyushu Spoon, which is a very important corner to get right so you can carry maximum speed through the Kink of 4 and up to the Ishikawa hairpin. Pretty good start to the lap then. The northern end of the track though is a bit... If you took just a couple of these corners, you would have a nice challenge, but all of this together makes a very slow, very windy second half of the lap. Just way too many changes of direction between 10 and 16, meaning there's absolutely no chance of a fight through here, and I don't think it would be particularly fun to watch in quali either. And so because of all this stuff up in the north, I'm going to have to stick Japan down in C tier. The Bahrain International Circuit is of course in Bahrain, the fourth smallest country on our list today. We are obviously going to kick out the Hoa Islands down here, but we're also going to kick out this island, Al Nasan, so we're just left with the central chunk of this thing. Turning this into a track, the straight coasts of the south give us some very long straights, with a couple sweepers to keep us interesting, meaning that most of the corners on this lap are up in the north around Manama. Initially, this looks a bit messy, but following the line through here, I think this could make some interesting racing, with multiple chances for cars to get side by side. I could definitely see a slipstream up this straight turning into a fight through 4, 5, 6, and actually that could probably carry on through 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. After that, the last two corners are very slow and very cramped together, which I just don't think is fun for Formula 1. But I do think you could get some fun racing here, so I am going to stick it up in B tier, which is decent. But the actual Bahrain International Circuit, which sits right by turn 3, in case you're wondering, is a solid A tier in my opinion, and so this thing is not going on the Is It Better board. The actual Jeddah Corniche circuit has, officially, 27 corners, so we have quite a lot to play with when converting Saudi Arabia. I didn't use all of them, instead getting this layout which has 19 corners, and actually, it looks kind of like a track you might see in the real world. It gives me vibes similar to maybe Road Atlanta, Mount Panorama, Circuit de la Sarthe, but like smaller. We start the lap with some medium speed corners before a more technical section leading us onto the longest straight of the track up the Red Sea. Turn 11 here is a devilish flat out kink in a Formula 1 car, which could turn out to be extra sketchy if you have to get on the brakes before the apex while travelling at 220 miles per hour. Could this corner kill someone? Yes. Has that ever stopped Saudi Arabia in their track design before? No. The rest of the lap gives us some more high-speed kinks and this weird triple chicane, which is very similar to the one at the end of the Las Vegas street circuit. I don't care for it personally, but I can appreciate how it ups the skill ceiling of a track and makes it a truer test of driver skill. You know what? I think this is actually a great track for a driver with a lot of opportunities for an overtake and a feel similar to many classic tracks around the world. I'm thinking this could be an A tier track, which brings us to the question, is it better than Jeddah? I know some of you are big fans of the Jeddah Corniche circuit with its buffet of high-speed, dangerous corners, and I will admit we have had some fun racing there, but I quite like this thing. It is close, but then again, I do believe that Jeddah has only had fun races because Max Verstappen keeps putting on a show, and if he specifically didn't have a quick car, the races would have been much more boring. And so yeah, you know what? I would prefer the Saudi Arabia track over Jeddah. It's going on the board. So, our next race is in Miami, which is obviously in the United States. But we have a race later in the year called the United States Grand Prix, so I think we should leave this map until then. But that begs the question, what do we do for Miami? The race is called the Miami Grand Prix, but I don't think we should be turning city boundaries into tracks. So instead, let's take the highest level subdivision after country level, which in the United States is called a state. It's a long-winded way of saying we're doing Florida.
as US states go, Florida has one of the more interesting shapes for a track, and when we transform it, yeah, that's looking pretty good actually. These square corners up at the top obviously give a vibe that this is partially a street circuit with some kind of park section down below around a lake or something. The first half of the lap is obviously very quick, with turn 6 being the first major braking zone after you've flung yourself around turn 5. And I quite like the look of that actually. It's a nice challenge for a driver and it will force some errors in a race. Really nice mix of ideas here then, with some good variety in the corner complexes. But I do worry about this slow section up by Jacksonville, particularly the transition between turns 12 and 13. It's similar to the Monaco hairpin, but if the hairpin was shoved closer to Mirabeau, just not fun. But that's really my only issue with this place, and the horrors of the Jacksonville chicane are more than made up for with these banger corners at 1 and 8 in particular. Some issues mean I can't give this top marks, but I do love the mix of high and medium speed corners, so this thing is straddling right on that line between A and B tier. B tier. In terms of the Is It Better board, I actually think the rating for this is similar to the Miami Autodrome. In a way, I'm tempted to put it on this board just to spite the Miami track. I am concerned that the chicane hairpin thing on the Florida track is worse than the underpass chicane in Miami, but then again, I think the rest of the lap is more fun on the Florida outline, and so, yeah, you know what? It's going on the board! Okay, so just like Miami, we now have another conundrum. Our next race is at Imola, which is obviously in Italy, but it's not the Italian Grand Prix. This race is called the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, named after, well, Emilia-Romagna, a region of Italy. I guess it's like a US state in a way, but not as independent. And actually, my main issue with this thing is the shape of it is just kind of boring to turn into a track. And actually, if we look back in time, the race at Imola has only been called the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix 4 times, 5 if you watch this in like a week or two. But there is another name that's been used 26 times at Imola, the San Marino Grand Prix. San Marino is small, smaller even than Singapore, making it the second tiniest thing on our list. And so the track does actually show off some of the finer details, making the overall lap lumpy. Oh, it's just like Jeddah again, but if someone blew it up like a balloon. This place is dirty air hell, particularly in the final sector. The first sector is alright and ironically reminds me of Imola, but after turn 10 we then get stuck in this Jeddah style nightmare where you are constantly swapping from one corner to the next, and you can guarantee there is no hope in hell of cars ever having a fight through here. I do like some of the corners here. Turns 1, 2, 3 look like they could be fun, and I do like the hefty sweepers of 8 and 9. But this rally stage mess is not what we want in Formula 1. So overall, I'm going to have to stick San Marino down in C tier along with Japan. And no, it is not better than the actual Imola. From the second smallest thing on our list to the smallest, it's time for Monaco. Monaco is so small in fact that if we took the 19 corner track around the outline of this place at real size, it would only be 12 kilometers long, which is long but not totally unreasonable for Formula 1. It's less than 2 laps of Spa. But to keep things fair, we assume this is the same length as all the other country tracks. And so while we do still have Tobac Corner with the exact same profile and entry direction, it is now tighter and therefore slower than the actual Monaco version. The lap starts with some corners reminiscent of the Baku City street circuit, but we do then get a fun kink through turn 3 into the slowest section of this track. It's another hairpin, exactly like the real Monaco. They can't keep getting away with this! The rest of the lap is similar. We have some high-speed sections like the big boy bend of turn 9, but other than that, the lap is pretty slow with 3 hairpins and multiple slow 90-degree corners. But then again, the real Monaco is slow as well. I can't see any good locations for an overtake here. But then again, you can't overtake in real Monaco either. This thing is not great. I'm thinking C tier at best, but I am wondering, can we add it to the Is It Better board? In terms of suitability for Formula 1, actual Monaco is the worst thing we've got. And so while this thing isn't exactly a banger, I am going to say it does go up on the board, because if nothing else, it's normal size for a track instead of this nonsense. Right, back to normal sized countries as we continue the European leg of the season in Spain. Spain overall is a very round country, but it does have some angular bits and protrusions, meaning we're not going oval racing in Formula 1 just yet. We only have 14 corners to play with here, so we're going to have to lose quite a few details, particularly on the south coast. But actually, I think this is a pretty good track. A cheeky high-speed chicane at turn 1, which is guaranteed to cause a collision on the first lap, but I never said that was a bad thing. A nice round turn 3 into the run down to Valencia, which serves up another beautifully tricky chicane for us. On the brakes through the apex of 4, trying to carry as much speed through 5 while the weight of the car is shifting. The whole thing is potentially the most important corner of the lap because it sets up the run down to turn 8. Beautiful. This whole thing is basically a circle with a few chicanes, which is weirdly similar to Castle Combe, a track in the UK. But Spain has some extra medium speed corners up by Galicia, and the chicanes here are more pronounced, making it more of a challenge for a Formula 1 car, because this is basically just flat. Also, I should add, the main reason I said Castle Combe was bad for Formula 1 back in the home race calendar video is because it's tiny. Look at this! A nice track then, but maybe lacking some of the variety it needs to become one of the greats. I'm thinking high B tier, low A, B, A, B, A. I'm gonna go A tier. I like it. And is it better than the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya? This one pains me to say because I do love the Barcelona track, but it might be. I'm going to stick it on here with a maybe tag. Let me know if you agree. Off to Canada now, an absolutely enormous country which we have to try and trackify with only 14 corners. All of the islands up in the north are close enough that I am going to include them, and so we get a track that looks something like this. I think the lower corner count might have helped Canada here, because this thing gives me a vibe similar to Interlagos, which is, you know, decent. Basically, the entire lap is a high and medium speed whirlwind with a couple of hairpins thrown in to test your hot tyres after you've been blasting it through the fast first sector. And of these hairpins, turn 10 down at the bottom of the Hudson is a perfect example of a hairpin done right. Just look at the lines on the way in here. You come through turn 9 trying to carry as much speed as possible, but at the same time have to get yourself over to the other side of the track to maximize your entry through the hairpin. Oh, it is beautiful. An old school high speed track for Canada then, with some corners that are sure to be fan favorites, like the fast follow through of turn 1 or the long edge of grip left-hander of turn 8. Combine that with the fact that this has some amazing corner names: Newfie, Erie, Baffin. This thing is an undeniable banger, and so the only tough decision here is whether this thing is a solid A tier or whether it makes its way up into the all-elusive S tier. If it looks like Interlagos, that's enough for me. S tier. And it's going on the board too. Sorry Montreal, but you don't have any corners called Baffin, do you? Austria up next, and if you thought I was being stingy on corners in Canada, just wait until you see this, because we only have 10 corners to play with. After a lot of tweaking to get down to 10 corners, I ended up with this. This thing has the feel of an old school track and actually looks pretty similar to Mossport in Canada. Turn 9 is the slowest corner on this track, and it's not even that slow. Other than that, we have some high-speed behemoths like the tightening turn 2, which you enter at 225 miles per hour. It's similar to maybe Parabolica at Monza. Expect some crashes. And that's not to mention turn 1 before it, which is similar to maybe Pouhon or Blanchimont at Spa, and so just getting round to turn 4 on this track is a major accomplishment. This is one for anyone who enjoys that kind of old school high speed circuit, and I can't deny that a hot lap around here would be a lot of fun, but I am getting a little concerned about the dirty air problem once more, and having turns 2, 4 and 9 as our only overtaking opportunities, we're not going to get any overtaking. I get the feeling that fans would like this place, but similar to fan favourites like Spa, it won't always give us an exciting race. Therefore, I'm going to stick it up in B tier, because despite its problems, I wouldn't mind just aimlessly watching cars fling themselves around this place, and you know we're going to get some big crashes in the race. And so we get to the UK. As I mentioned before, we're going to be leaving out Northern Ireland because it's just too far away, and we're actually going to be leaving out Orkney and the Shetland Islands as well. It's a shame because they both have a town called Twat, which I do think would make a good corner name for cultural reasons. Which just leaves us with Great Britain, which for those of you who don't know refers to the big island in the middle here and not all the other gubbins in the sea. Silverstone gives us 18 corners to play with, but maybe it shouldn't because I do not like that. We start with the line up near Newcastle and race our way down to turn 1, which you could call the Norfolk Curve, but I much prefer to call Skegness, just to confuse all of you who are not from here and are now wondering whether that's a real place name or I just made it up to sound funny. That then brings us into a slow, windy first sector with a tight chicane at London, before we race along the south coast to the hairpin at Land's End. We then get this incredible stop-start series of hairpins and 90-degree corners as we head up the west coast, which just looks awful. Scotland is a bit better and you could have some fun flinging yourself through turn 14, but after that, it's stop-start again, and so the flow of this track never really gets going. Just too many corners, too close together, killing off any flow and any semblance of enjoyment along with it. This thing is going at least down in C tier, but I'm looking at San Marino in Japan, and they at least have some nice sections. I don't want to drive any of this UK track, and so I'm thinking, much like everything that happens within this island, just a bit crap, mate. The UK is going in D tier, and I'm going to get some angry comments, I know. You've probably seen these before. I would hope so, they're in part 1. In the last video, we started to answer the question, which Formula 1 host country would make the best track? Also including some US states and San Marino, which is not a host country anymore. We went through the first half of the season from Australia to the UK and filled out this tier list with my own home of Great Britain down in D tier and Canada on top of the pile up in S. Today, we're going through from Belgium to Abu Dhabi to see if anyone else can make it up into the elusive S tier along with Canada. To recap the rules for this, even though some of these countries have mountains and stuff, we're assuming each of these tracks is flat and we're taking them all clockwise to keep the judgments fair. We assume every track is roughly average length for a Formula 1 track, and then, because we're dealing with countries, we have limited every country to no more corners than the actual track inside that country, which means the USA can have no more than 20 corners, the same as COTA. Brazil is limited to 15 like Interlagos, and Italy has to make do with only 11 corners. Let's see how that goes. My name is Mr. V, a guy who used to design cars and now just draws squiggly lines in Photoshop. And let's get into it. We start this video off in Belgium, which is limited to 19 corners just like Spa, but kind of spookily, on my very first draft of making a track around here, it made something with 19 corners, like it was meant to be. But the real question is, are they good corners? No. Lots of these tracks have a habit of creating S's of just too many S's. I mean, look at this thing down on the French border. Instead of Maggots and Becketts, what we have here is Maggots and Becketts and Becketts and Beckett. It's too much. If these were just a little bit elongated, I'd probably be saying, Caesar's Palace, welcome back to Formula 1. The rest of this track is fine, but there's not really anything to talk about here. Much like the actual country of Belgium, it's just sort of there. There's no significant straights to get a slipstream going, but at the same time, it's not super tight and windy like some of the other countries. Just a bit bland. For being thoroughly uninteresting, I'm going to stick Belgium down in C tier, and obviously it's not better than the actual Spa track, and so it will not be going on the is it better than the actual track board. We continue the European leg of the season in Hungary. The Hungaroring gives us 14 corners to play with, but actually we only need 13 to turn this into a track, as the entire southern border turns into one enormous straight. If we assume this thing is average length for a Formula 1 track, about 5.5–6 kilometers, that means that this straight is over 2.5 kilometers long, several hundred meters longer than the entire flat out section in Baku. Sadly then, that means all of the corners are cramped into one half of the track, and actually 9 out of 13 of them are in just the first quarter of the track. I like everything from turn 8 onwards. There's some fun high-speed corners and some tricky kinks, but this run from turns 1 to 7 is diabolical. Much like Belgium, Hungary, your S's have too many S's in them. Obviously, this track is very silly, and actually the racing here would also be very silly. For that reason, we're going to have to stick Hungary down in C tier along with Belgium, as they've both committed the crime of giving me Beckett's and Beckett's and Beckett's and Beckett's and Beckett's and Beckett's and Beckett's. The Netherlands is up next. It's not a huge country, but I'll give them one thing: the shape of this place is weird as hell. Could make a good track though. We're limited to 14 corners, just like Zandvoort, and when trying to refine this place down, we end up with something like this. It's quite an interesting layout actually, and not dissimilar to Zandvoort itself, with lots of long, organic curves, giving this place a very natural flow as you drive around. And it has the exact same chicane profile as Hans Ernst. I like this. It's just satisfying to trace a racing line around here, but this place does have some setbacks. The lack of a main straight is one of them, meaning tyres never get a proper chance to rest during a lap here, and therefore a long Formula 1 race could turn into a tyre preservation competition with no one really pushing or trying to make any overtakes. I think this would be fantastic in qualifying, and with the right conditions could have a good race, but we can't guarantee that. And so as good as the Netherlands track is, and I am going to stick it up in A tier, I can't promise we'll get a banger race every time, and so I can't say that it's better than Zandvoort. After the Netherlands, we head back to Italy, but obviously we used San Marino for Imola, and so it's finally time to find out if the home of the Tifosi would make a good track. Getting this place down to just 11 corners from Monza was a challenge, but after quite a lot of tweaking, I got to this. We start the lap off with a run down the eastern coast into a hairpin at the heel of the boot, then a couple technical corners before a high-speed trip around Sicily with a hairpin for good measure, before we set ourselves up for this long straight once more up the western coast. There's a few different names we could give to this straight here, maybe the Roman Straight, the Mediterranean Straight, but I'm personally a fan of the Papal Straight. Nice little history pun for you there. That brings us into a very high-speed northern sector of the track. The medium-speed corners of 7 and 8, the fast follow-through of 9, the long winding down through 10, before one more corner around Venice where you need to get on throttle as early as possible to maximise your speed over the line. It's an interesting layout then, but I can't help but feeling that it's missing something. Other countries of low corner counts have done well, but Italy is just a bit too simple. It's missing that corner variety or the really beautiful flow to push it into the very top tier. I'm thinking B tier for Italy. While Monza is equally as simple, it does a much better job of using its 11 corners for something much more fun. It's not about the size of your corner counts, guys, it's about how you use them. Our next stop is Azerbaijan, and the Baku City Street Circuit gives us 20 corners to play with. A reasonable layout around here only actually needs 19 to create something. The lap starts off well enough. A technical hairpin with a tricky braking zone down at 2, some deceptively hard medium speed corners of 6 and 7 into the beautifully long turn 8, but then this thing goes off the rails. Hard. From turn 9 onwards we have this brutal series of S's. Well, actually, they're not even S's. This is more like a hill climbing course, better suited to a rally car, or maybe some Japanese kid in an AE86. But when they're flat and in a Formula 1 car, just not fun at all. Say the line, Mini Mr. V.
Caesar's Palace, welcome back to Formula 1.
Just awful. Azerbaijan clearly saw how Miami made their track in the shape of an alligator and decided they wanted an animal track too, but they chose a hedgehog. Yeah, nah, you boofed it, lads. I'm thinking D tier for this thing, and it's not going to be troubling the Is It Better board anytime soon. We have one final microstate for the tier list in Singapore, which unlike places like Monaco, still has a very normal country shape to it. 19 corners means we can get into all the nooks and crannies of the harbour areas here and create a track that looks something like this. We start the lap off with a pretty standard turn 1, and then immediately it's the swimming pool section from Monaco. But they've kind of messed up the entry speed and the details of the corner profiles, and so this thing doesn't have the magic of Lapicine, instead reminding us of the old grandstand sections from Singapore, just in reverse. We then get this big double apex protrusion in the southwest, which actually reminds me of the old Valencia street circuit. And come to think of it, this whole thing looks like the old Valencia Street Circuit, but kind of flipped upside down. Some fast switchbacks then along the north coast, which do look fun, but this complex is going to suffer from some dirty air problems. A technical final complex with one final tiny hairpin to bunch cars up before crossing the line. It's not awful then. The run from 9 to 17 would be a lot of fun to watch, but this track would suffer from significant dirty air problems, making following closely tricky, and therefore we'd get a lack of overtakes in the race. Much like actual Singapore. It does do a good job of capturing the feel of the actual Marina-based circuit, both requiring a high level of technical skill to get a quick lap around here. So I'm gonna say it's a solid, B-tier circuit. Now I'm torn. Does it go on the Is It Better board? They both have similar vibes actually. Both have some fun high-speed corners and some technical slow corners, and maybe too many slow corners. It's a hard one to decide. But I am thinking from vibes from that high-speed middle sector of this new track, I am going to stick it up on the board. Off then to the United States, home of the United States Grand Prix, and two other Grand Prix, but we'll get onto that. This is obviously a big old country. Well, I guess not an old country, a pretty young country, all things considered. This is a big country, which is mostly a rectangle, but it does have quite a lot of detail, particularly around the edges. And so the 20 corners we get from COTA go to create something like this. We start the lap along the long Canada border, which is obviously a straight line in real life, but it does appear curved here. The reason for that is you won't catch me dead using a Mercator projection. This brings us down into turn 1, which is basically 130R, a concept which I find hilarious for a first corner, thank you USA, but it does mean we're going to have about 5 DNFs every time we start a race here. To clarify, that's not a bad thing, just a very silly thing. We then have a bit of a loop up around New England, which is actually reminiscent of Village and the Loop from Silverstone. Some mini S's, and then the long run down into the hairpin at Florida. The rest of this lap is then kind of wild. You have a cheeky chicane down at New Orleans, a long left-hander into a hairpin, which would be unbelievably tricky to nail, another chicane, and at this point your tyres are going to be screaming, but you have to get this right because it sets up this enormous flat-out section through the kink of San Diego and up the entire west coast. This place is tough. This track ticks all the right boxes then. It's got a good variety of corner speeds, high speed corners, low speed corners, medium speed corners, and it adheres to the best practices of modern F1 track design, which basically means long straights into hard braking zones, of which this has 3. This complex from turns 5 to 8 does concern me a little bit by being goofy, but other than that, this place would bang for modern Formula 1, and actually for any motorsport really. I'm feeling that the USA should go up in S tier along with its northern neighbour Canada, but for the record, I do think Canada's better. And actually, regarding the Is It Better board, as good as the Circuit of the Americas is, the Circuit of America, that's going to get confusing, I think could give us slightly better racing, and so it's going on the board! That's going to be tough to beat, but Mexico does have a pretty interesting shape and 17 corners to play with, and so it's got a chance. Turning this into a track, we get this, and yeah, it's pretty good. A chicane brings you over the line into a decent length straight into a hairpin. Then there's another straight into another hairpin. Hang on a second. That's just the end of the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. This is followed by one more chicane, which I could do without, to be honest, before we swing it through turn 5 and kick off an absolutely stunning high-speed section. You also have to get things slowed down for turns 6 and 7, but then we have a naughty kink into the high-speed turn 9, a huge long left-hander, very reminiscent of the old turn 3 from Sochi, i.e. the only good corner at Sochi, another kink, another medium-speed sweeper, and then another high-speed chicane. This place is pretty fun then, with some good corner concepts, in particular this run from turns 7 to 12, but it does have some setbacks, particularly the chicane in the first sector, which means we have 4 slow corners in a row, which just gets a bit tedious. Honestly, the northern section of this track along the Gulf is an S tier for me, but the Pacific section, it's a bit mid, and it brings the overall rating down. I was really hoping we could get another S tier out of Mexico, but overall I'm going to have to stick it in A tier. That's pretty good, and it's definitely not bad news for Mexico, as when we compare it to Hermanos Rodriguez, one of the worst tracks for modern Formula 1, this place is clearly better, and so it is going on the Is It Better board. We head south to Brazil next, and while, yes, technically the name of this race is the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, look, I want to do Brazil, you want me to do Brazil, let's just all pretend it's still called the Brazilian Grand Prix like it used to be and carry on, okay? Turning this into a track gives us something high speed and flowing, not unlike the actual track between the lakes. The flow through here is beautiful. Until turn 9, and then it's kind of good, but only good. The slowest corner around here is turn 12 in the middle of the rainforest section, and actually this whole section does remind me of the middle sector of Interlagos, but sadly not with quite the same magic. Other than that, this track is a high-speed blast, but I am concerned once again about dirty air problems. You would never see an overtake for position down at turn 3 because the follow-throughs of turns 1 and 2 make that impossible. Turn 6 is a valid overtaking opportunity and does allow fights to continue around turn 7, but that's pretty much it on this track. Potentially a good qualifying circuit, but I think not the best for an actual Formula 1 Grand Prix. I do really like the look of this place, but it pains me to say it might only be B tier. And as you might have guessed, this thing is not better than Interlagos. To be honest, even if it was up in A or even S tier, it may still not be better than Interlagos. That's not too much of a loss for the Brazil circuit. We begin the final triple header of the season in Las Vegas, and so like Miami, we're going to look at the state it sits in, Nevada. Nevada, like many of the states in the western USA, was drawn with a ruler, and so we do not need all 17 corners from the actual Las Vegas Strip circuit, instead getting something with just 6. What do we talk about here? It's got a long straight, then a shorter straight, then a kind of medium-sized straight, then one more along the Utah border, then into some actual corners down by the city of Las Vegas, and well, that's it. It's obviously very basic, but ironically, if F1 did try this, you would see absolutely tons of overtakes here, as DRS would be king. That doesn't mean it would be exciting though, as 90% of the viewing experience is just watching people draft each other. You might enjoy that, but it's not really in the spirit of circuit racing. I think it's one to leave for the stock car fans. A very simple, pretty silly circuit then, but I am still going to stick it up in C tier, because while there's nothing particularly interesting here, there's nothing wrong either. It just kind of is. It's not better than the Las Vegas Strip circuit though, and so we head off to the Middle East to trackify our final 2 countries of the season. The geography of Qatar is very similar to that of Bahrain, being a tall, narrow island, but Qatar is significantly bigger than Bahrain, and so lots of its smaller features get rounded out to give us a very ovular circuit. Obviously, the first thing we need to address is, what the hell have you done here, Qatar? What is this? So the lap starts out with a flat out kink similar to Copse at Silverstone into a lopsided chicane, which I actually think is pretty good, but then we get to this. This is probably the worst sequence of corners we've seen in either of these videos. This is some medieval torture device type of track design. The worst of this is obviously turns 4 to 7, but then they throw in one more awful chicane with turns 8 and 9 to just kick you when you're down. It's a shame because the rest of this track is not bad, I don't mind it. Qatar has turned up with a pretty simple high-speed track with a racing feel similar to the actual Lusail circuit, which sits down by turn 14, in case you're wondering, but they've then ruined it with this section, which, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, is starting to make me miss Lusail. Qatar is therefore going down in D tier, and while I am definitely not a fan of the Lusail circuit, I will admit it's better than this thing. Ugh, get it away from me. Surely it has to pick up again with the United Arab Emirates, home of our season finale, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. The UAE is a much larger country and also a more country-shaped country. We have 16 corners to play with thanks to Yas Marina, and so we do lose some of the detail up along the coastline in the north, leaving us with this. A high-speed circuit then, with a long kink straight down in the south and another one up along the coast by Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Our first corner of the lap is a tight hairpin at turn 2, which is going to be interesting on the opening lap. We then wind the speed up through turns 3 and 4 before getting on the brakes again just a little bit for turns 5 and 6, which are trying their hardest to look like the layout of Eau Rouge Radion, but remember, this one is flat. Still tricky though to keep your speed up through here and maximize your run up to turn 7, where we begin the technical half of this lap. There are a couple nice corner profiles in here. I think 10 into 11 could be very interesting, but overall, it's not that exciting. I do think the circuit could be good for overtaking due to the massive flat out sections, and the back half would be interesting in qualifying, but overall, this doesn't really have the flow necessary to make it a top tier track. Overall, it sits on that boundary between A and B tier on our tier list, but to be cautious, I'm going to stick it down in B tier, mainly because the second half of the lap is just a bit too stop-start. But then, we have to ask the question, is it better than the actual track in Abu Dhabi? You know what, this might be controversial, but I actually think the Yas Marina track is pretty good. It's just that in Formula 1 we get boring racing here because lots of the time the season is already decided by the time we arrive. And so no, while the UAE track is alright, it is not going on the Is It Better board. And that means that our entries onto the board after these two videos are Saudi Arabia, Florida, Monaco, Canada, Singapore, the United States, Mexico, and maybe Spain. Which begs the question, why did none of these countries just do this? You've probably seen these before, but have you seen these? F1 travels all around the world and races on a number of tracks, each with their own unique character. But one thing that lots of these tracks have in common is a dedicated karting facility right next door, and this makes a lot of sense. These are typically places with lots of open space, hundreds of used tyres ready to make barriers with, a direct debit with a company that lays asphalt, and oh yeah, loads of racing fans nearby, which kinda helps, and so it makes sense to build a dedicated karting facility for racing fans to enjoy when the big cars aren't going vroom vroom. But recently I got thinking, what if these little tracks were actually the big tracks instead? That is right, today we're looking at which F1 track karting tracks would make the best F1 tracks. Confused? Good. So am I. 15 of the tracks on this year's F1 calendar have karting facilities that we can talk about, and so we're going to go through each of them and add them all to our trusty fictional tracks tier list. A couple rules, as always. We're going to assume that each of these tracks are flat, and we're going to scale up these karting tracks to the size of an average Formula 1 track, because as funny as it would be to squeeze Formula 1 cars around these tiny corners, it would feel like the whole calendar is taking place in the Baku Castle section. Oh, but one change from normal. In every other video, I have run all of these tracks clockwise to keep things unbiased, but as these are actual tracks, we're going to run each of them in the direction they actually run in real life, and we're going to have the start-finish lines in the same place as real life too. Also, when I say official karting track, I want to be clear that is a loose term because, like in the case of this track at Spa-Francorchamps, it is run by a different company, but it just so happens to be inside the Grand Prix circuit, and so we're going to count it. Anything that's on the land of the normal track or is owned by the same company and so, shows up on the website, it all counts. So as always, I got to work researching each of these places like a private detective to find out if they are in fact associated with the main circuit, and so if I should turn them into an F1 track. This video was inspired when I heard the news that a new karting track is opening at Silverstone next month. For some reason, I haven't been invited to the grand opening, a little rude, but it did get me thinking. Would this be good as a Formula 1 track? And so that probably makes a good place to start. To keep things interesting, instead of going through in calendar order like we normally do, in this video we're going to go through in order of how close these tracks are to my house, starting with Silverstone. Like many tracks, this place will have multiple layouts once it opens, so we're going to use the longest one, called Grand Prix. Seems fitting. 17 corners in an overall anti-clockwise direction, and I have to say, it looks like we're starting off strong. Turns 1 and 2 here are reminiscent of the Senna S's at Interlagos, which means we could get some battles continuing through here and all the way up to turn 3 if we're lucky. It is a little sad then that these battles will always be cancelled out by the S's of 4, 5, 6. I see why you've done this here, can't have a track at Silverstone without paying homage to Maggots and Beckett, just one. But it is a shame that battles will never get their way down to the tightening left of turn 7. Thankfully, there is another opportunity for an overtake down at turn 9, which kicks off a more technical second half of the lap with another set of S's. Like, okay, we get it, you like S's, Silverstone, but come on. Overall, I think this is a pretty successful Grand Prix track. Nice corner speed variety, multiple overtaking opportunities, some very organic corner forms, and some kinky straights thrown in. always prefer them when they're kinky. Silverstone starts us off strong then, and so I'm pretty confident sticking this thing straight up into A tier. And before I get the British bias, trust me, I've seen the rest of the list and there is some hot, steaming garbage. This is one of the better ones. Spa is up next with a karting facility down inside turn 15. A bit more of a generic karting layout compared to Silverstone, but it still looks like a decent track and clearly has some corners inspired by the main circuit. It even has a horrible bus stop chicane to ruin the end of the lap. Nice touch. I do enjoy they started the lap here with a heavy, fast right-hander because there is nothing that I enjoy more than seeing a child mess up and hit a wall at 45 miles per hour. And it makes for a fun corner when we scale this up because now we basically have 130R as turn 1. Not fantastic for overtaking opportunities, this is pretty tricky to go side by side around a corner like that, but after turn 2 we then have another run into turn 4 where you can get another chance at that pass. While there's a couple corners where modern F1 cars could make an attempt at an overtake, this place is almost all medium speed corners, and so dirty air is going to be an issue. But then again, it does have an overall feel somewhat similar to places like the Red Bull Ring or maybe even Interlagos, and so actually it could give us some great racing. The Eau Rouge Radeon inspired turns 9 and 10 and the chicane at the end of the lap do worry me though, that we'll just get cars all separated here. And then because the corners are not that varied through the rest of the lap, I can't rate this as highly as the Great Britain track. I'm thinking B tier for Belgium. Italy next, where Monza has a temporary track on the infield of Parabolica. Now, I'm sure that I would still have fun racing around a place that looks like a queue for a B-movie themed coaster at Universal Studios, but after seeing the last two permanent karting tracks, this one doesn't quite hit the same. Oh no, you ran wide and bumped into the barriers. Monza, you are a beloved racing facility where stuff like this happens on a regular basis. Lay some tarmac and add some permanent curbs, so when I hit them in a go-kart, I flip it upside down and crash into the side of a tree, because that is a fun day out karting.
You like jazz?
Having said that though, turning this into a Formula 1 track does give a pretty okay layout, I have to say. I enjoy that we start with a long, tightening spoon corner down at turn 1, followed by some nice sweeping turns 2 and 3. I do think we could do with some more corner variety in the middle of the lap, maybe run a straight line down from 4 to 5 to give some different corner profiles and give turn 8 the same treatment, push it out and make a tighter hairpin, running us into this nice S's into straight combo at the end of the lap. Overall then, the Monza karting track is pretty simple with nothing awful going on, but at the same time, a real lack of corner variety. I think it hovers right around that low B, high C tier kind of range, but I feel like I'm going to be generous and stick it up in B tier because it did allow me to make a B movie reference, which I never thought would happen in this series. Now, this is a bit of a weird one. You might be looking at the map here, or maybe you've been to Monaco and you're thinking, Mr. V, there's no kart track here. But you're wrong. It's true, there is no kart track next to the Circuit de Monaco, but the Circuit de Monaco is a kart track. Whoa. This isn't some joke about how small the track is. No, they literally used this track for the Monaco Kart Cup up until 2010. Granted, they didn't use the entire layout of the Formula 1 circuit, but a modified version of the harbour section, but it still counts, I think. Now, this competition does not run anymore, mainly because the last ever winner was a certain Charles Leclerc, and so they cancelled it so Monegasque would be the reigning champion forever, and because it's been 15 years, information about the exact track layout is hard to find. I found some pictures of the event, and coupled with some footage from Eurosport back in the day, I believe the circuit looks something like this, running from Tubac to Rascasse and then along the section that is used for the Formula 1 pit lane. To slow things down, they then added a number of chicanes, and so we end up with something that looks kind of like Montreal, Baku, or maybe Paul Ricard if you sat on them. A fun start to the lap then, as we have the Monaco swimming pool section as normal, but actually scaled up a little bit, meaning we have a very fast sweep through 1 and 2, and then a wide, forgiving chicane of 3 and 4, which could see some fighting. But then we slow things right down for this 90s style chicane before the new big Rascasse. Ironically, this place does have some potential overtaking opportunities with long runs into turns 12 and 17, and so while it might not be the most flowing track ever, it could see some good racing. For that reason, I'm going to stick it in C tier, because while we could have an interesting event, these tiny slow chicanes give it a soul-crushing feeling that mean I just can't put it any higher. Off to Austria and the Red Bull Ring next, which has another temporary track made out of plastic barriers and... oh no, Austria. Even for a karting track, that's a bit much, don't you think? How many corners does this have? 23? And 13 of them are hairpins? That's far too many hairpins! In other tracks with too many corners, like Jeddah, at least most of them aren't real corners, but here, I guarantee you're going to feel every single one of those, so better book an appointment with your chiropractor now. I mean, what do you want me to say about this place? This is worse than some of the ridiculous logo tracks we made in earlier episodes. And this is a real track that you can pay money to go and drive on! I'm sorry, Austria, but this is the kind of steaming midsummer bin juice that I would expect maybe from a logo track, but not from a kart track, not from you. Easiest F tier of my life, get down there. All that being said, I do think this is a good opportunity to look at ways that we can start to fix some of these tracks. Obviously, I've started doing this a little bit already, but nothing needs it more than this place. Firstly, we need to cut out some of these corners entirely, so we're going to start by skipping straight from turn 2 to turn 5, meaning we get a long flat out section into a pretty tight left-hander. Then we can remove turn 8 and widen turn 9, making the entry into 10 a tricky, slowing swap over where you need to maintain good speed while finding the perfect balance in your car, so you get a good run through 10 and 11. We can join turns 14 and 16, making a hefty follow through into the chicane of 17-18, which could be an overtaking opportunity, particularly if we bank turn 13, meaning people can follow more closely around this whole section. And then, once again, just way too many hairpins here at the end, so let's remove these and instead replace this with 2 fast right-handers into one final slow corner leading us onto the main straight, which could be an opportunity to close up to the car ahead if you've kept your tyres in better condition or if you're just braver on the brakes. All in all, this is a pretty nice layout. Shame we didn't do that then, Red Bull Ring, and so you're still down in F tier. The Hungaroring is up next, which has this temporary circuit down by turn 1. As a karting track, it's pretty basic, but actually when we scale it up into a Formula 1 track, it's okay, you know. Despite its simple look, this place actually has some good corner variety, including these nice sweepers through 3 and 4 into the enormous turn 5. If you thought places like Barcelona turn 3 were a long corner, that has nothing compared to this, where you will just be turning right forever, and the braking for turn 6 is going to be almost impossible. I kinda like it. Potentially a fun 2-corner overtake opportunity at turns 9 and 10, but that is massively dependent on a good run through 8. And so all in all, I think this place is going to struggle with a lack of overtakes, at least with current F1 regulations. A deceptively simple track then, but some of the greats are, such as Monza, and so I'm actually going to stick the Hungaroring kart track up in B tier, and it even could have gone higher if it had some more obvious overtaking opportunities. The next closest F1 track with a karting track is, surprisingly, Jeddah. Now, the Jeddah Corniche karting circuit isn't right next to Jeddah Corniche, it's several blocks away, and so I almost didn't include it in this video, but it turns out it is official. It's on the website and everything. The first half of this is your very standard karting layout, lots of 90 and 180 degree corners in a big rectangle. But then in the second half, this place goes off the rails. I am actually a big fan of the run from turn 6 to turn 9 because turn 8 is going to be full speed, and so we'll have a feeling similar to something like Blanchimont. And then I can get on board with the triple left of 11, 12, 13. But I fear that after that we slow things down a bit too much with the double hairpins of 15 and 16. Honestly, just shortcutting from turns 15 to 17 could have made this an awesome circuit, but as it stands, it's a fun concept. Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the front, party in the back, but it lacks the overall flow that holds it back from becoming a fan favourite. Good corner speed variety here means I'm going to stick this up as a high B tier, but I can't quite elevate it into A. And then, as much as I don't personally like the Jeddah Corniche circuit, it is becoming quite well liked among fans, and so this thing is not going to go up on the is it better than the actual track board. Bahrain up next, and they've built Mini Bahrain. Okay lads, very cute, I see what you've done here, and actually to be fair, they have made enough changes from the main circuit that this is something new. Well, it kind of just looks like Lusail, but we're not going to dwell on that one. The first sector here definitely has the same concept as the main Bahrain track. Turn 1, where some overtakes could happen, then some stuff, and then another overtaking opportunity up in one of the corners of the track. Sector 2 is pretty different though. A fast, flat-out run through 6 and 7 means a heavy braking zone down into the hairpin of turn 8, and an overtaking opportunity here could then carry on through turn 9 and into the China or Malaysia-style snail corner at 10 and 11. Honestly, this is such a good addition to any track. Bahrain International Karting Circuit track designer, good job. I am a little sad to see that this place ends with this chicane before the main straight, which reminds me of the old chicane at the end of Barcelona Catalunya. Not exactly great for racing, but that is just one blemish on an otherwise very nice track. Once again, Bahrain International Karting Circuit designer, and I know you're watching, good job. Round of applause for you. A-tier circuit. Next up is Bahrain's neighbour Qatar, with this circuit that sits up by turn 12 of Lusail. 19 corners laid out clockwise in a circuit which I can only describe as being a bit weird. Don't get me wrong, from the start up until turn 14 is actually quite a fun layout. A fast sector 1, a nice series of flicks through 9, 10, 11. It's got an interesting layout to be sure, but it's just a bit weird. And then of course we get to the final sector and it's not bad necessarily, but I do think the overall track would be better if we just didn't have turns 15 and 16. And so I can't find anything particularly wrong with this circuit, but there's something I can't quite put my finger on that's stopping me from giving it more praise. Maybe it's the fact that it looks like Thing from the Addams family, or perhaps a Dachshund with tank tracks instead of front legs. Whatever it may be, the weird vibe of this place balances out with an overall decent layout, so I'm going to stick it up in B tier. It turns out the Middle Eastern Formula 1 tracks have a 100% attendance record in this video because Abu Dhabi also has a kart track down by turn 5 of Yas Marina. Now, this place very much is the most generic kart track you're gonna see today. I know they did something a little bit different for the first sector, but other than that, this is a team sport karting track and you can't convince me otherwise. It's giving bold and brash, honey, and sadly at this point in time, that is not a good thing. A fun first sector then with this crazy full throttle hold on for dear life moment up until turn 4, but after that, it's just the first half of the circuit to Barcelona Catalunya from Temu. And even if we got the real thing, I don't exactly think fans would be going crazy about that. Just far too generic, nothing to compliment here, so I'm going to have to stick it down at the bottom of C tier. This would have been the worst track of this video so far, if Austria didn't crash out while using the hairpin machine. Off to a different continent now, as the USA is up next with this track down by the pit straight of COTA. Now, I think COTA will deny this, but I'm pretty sure they've designed this to look like a giant cowboy hat. I see what you did here, and I respect it. That's funny as hell. Obviously, it's not just a hat, they've added all these swiggly bits here, which we'll get onto in a second, but to start the lap, we have these two nice fast corners, which I actually really like. It's not quite flat round here, which means there's some opportunity to bunch up to the car ahead and potentially set up an overtake on the run down into turn 3, which sets up our technical section. I really like the organic shape of 6, 7 and 8, including this protrusion on the entry to 8, making the braking extra difficult. This then leads us through some fast, almost flat S's of turns 9 and 10 before we break down into turn 11, and so this section could feel similar to the middle of Bahrain. Some more nice touches follow, like the rounded hairpin of turn 14, which I hope and pray is banked like turn 3 at Zandvoort, and then we have a couple right angle corners because, let's face it, we are in America, gotta give the people what they love. Overall, I really like this. It could actually have a feel similar to Zandvoort, and while there's only one clear overtaking opportunity down at turn 3, there are a couple other places where you could make something happen if the kahunas are feeling big enough that day. An interesting variety of corners then in a fun layout sends the USA all the way up into A tier along with Bahrain and Great Britain. We stay in the US but head over to Las Vegas, which has an indoor karting track, first one of the video. This is inside the Grand Prix Plaza building, you know, the building that has all the garages in, and it's open most of the year as far as I'm aware, but I'm pretty sure it'll be shut now as the track literally crosses over the pit lane. I don't think anyone would find it fun if they were out for a nice little race with their friends, but then they got railed by Alonso as he was coming out for a... You know what? I heard it. Before you say you... Just don't comment. I know what you're going to say. Just don't comment. Indoor kart tracks are typically a lot more windy than outdoor ones, and this place is not beating the allegations, offering this to fans. And, ooh, I can tell this isn't going to go well, but turning this into a track, we get... It looks like you left Jeddah in your back pocket before you put your jeans in the washer. It looks like the Lusail logo track. Sorry, got some flashbacks. 25 corners anti-clockwise in an ode to... What is this an ode to? CTE? To be fair, I think some sections of this in isolation could be okay. Turn 14 all the way to the line could be an interesting technical section of a lap if the rest of the lap was a lot faster. Honestly, just cutting from turns 2 to 7 here would make such a difference to the overall feel, but as it stands, it's just way too stop-start. It feels like trawling around a car park trying to find a space. Cars will never really get up to speed here, meaning we'll get an event similar to something like Monaco, but with more corners, longer races, and potentially even less chances at an overtake. Doesn't sound great, does it? Never a review that you want to hear for a track, and I will say, being fair, this thing is not as awful as the Red Bull Ring karting track, so I might stick it in D tier, but that is being generous. Alright, the further away from that monstrosity in Vegas I can get, the better. And so luckily, our next track is on the other side of the world, in Shanghai, nestled between turn 6 and turn 12 of the Shanghai International Circuit. And I have to say, things are looking up again, because turning this into a Grand Prix track... Okay. To me, this does look quite a lot like COTA, but kind of flipped because this thing is clockwise. We start with basically Sector 1 from Zandvoort, which then leads into a very fast section where I guess, in theory, you could get side by side, but you'd have to do that through the fast turns 4 and 5, and so... good luck. From that point onwards, this is basically just COTA Sector 1 in reverse, but that does give a nice variation on things as we now have a fast entry into the S's. I will say the profile of the S's here is not quite as refined, not quite as flowing as the S's at places like COTA or Suzuka, but it's still a nice touch. This track should see a lot of fighting, with overtaking potential down at 1, 4, 9, and potentially 12 or 14. Even without those last two, that is a lot more opportunities than many other tracks can boast. Even though the overall flow here is not as good as places like COTA, Suzuka, or maybe even Silverstone, it does do a good job of evoking the same sort of feelings. And so I'm pretty confident sticking this down right around the middle of A tier, which is getting kind of busy this episode. Okay, so the closest track to Shanghai is Suzuka, and that does have a karting track, or actually more than one in fact. But doing this in order of distance from me currently, there is one track in between. Interlagos. The Kartodromo Ayrton Senna sits right after turn 3 here, and much like some of the tracks from the start of this video, this thing is a gnarly, fast outdoor circuit. Now, there are websites for this place and even an official Instagram, but none of them show the layouts used around here. I did manage to find some information from race organisers and videos of people driving around here, and so I'm pretty sure that this is the Grand Prix layout, meaning we get 14 corners clockwise in something I would describe as pretty lovely. If you want to have slower technical sections, this is how you do it, while maintaining good flow around a lap. Also, these slow sections are then bookended by some beautiful high-speed sections, including this crazy run around turn 7 and a long run down into turn 14, meaning you need to be hard on the brakes here, and this could turn into a favourite overtaking opportunity right before the line. Maximum drama. All in all, I really like this layout. Good corner variety with some organic corner forms, decent overtaking opportunities, and a good spectacle in qualifying as well. It has a layout similar to something like the Nürburgring Grand Prix track, but a lot faster. And so, all of that being said, I'm pretty confident sticking this thing up in A tier as well. While I was tempted by an S tier ranking for this track and a couple of these others, they lack a certain something that all great tracks need, but this is the kind of place that could gain that through reputation over time. And so we have just one more kart track to talk about over at Suzuka. There are in fact multiple kart tracks at Suzuka, but we're going to talk about the largest and fastest of them, the Suzuka South Circuit, which sits down by Degner and 130R. And actually, wait, that's on the back of my shirt. It's here. Once again, this is obviously a track inspired by the main circuit, but you are not going to hear me complaining because this is a banger. Bear in mind that due to the scale of this place, these straights are long, similar in fact to somewhere like Yas Marina, and so if you get a good run over the line, we could see quite a lot of overtaking opportunities into this wide, forgiving chicane to make turns 1 and 2. That then leads us, of course, into Suzuka Sector 1. But mirrored. Because we scaled this up, these corners are actually a bit wider and faster than their equivalents on the main circuit, but that could be a good thing. If you need a bit less steering lock to get through here, that might mean these corners are a bit less aero dependent, and therefore you can follow the car ahead a bit more easily. We then have a huge, fast turn 8 up into the hairpin of turn 9. Lovely place for a dive bomb, which then gives us another fast run down into the chicane of 10 and 11. Lovely place for a dive bomb. This is obviously a simple circuit, only 12 corners in total, but every single one of them serve a purpose. They create something with beautiful flow, multiple overtaking opportunities, a high skill ceiling, and some memorable corner complexes that could become fan favorites. We've had some solid tracks so far in this video, but this one for me has that star power that the others were lacking, that certain je ne sais quoi. I think we can all agree that this thing is A tier at a minimum, and while it might be too simple for some people, good things do come in small packages. Trust me, I know. And so I'm going to stick the Suzuka South Circuit up into S tier. Congratulations. And so this is our completed tier list for the episode. 14 karting tracks that sit alongside their big brother circuits, and then a bit of Monaco because they had to be different, didn't they? You've probably seen these before. Every Formula 1 Grand Prix has a trophy which is handed out to the first, second and third place drivers, as well as the team of the winning driver. Some races have the same trophy every year, while some like to change things up with different design competitions or by incorporating their sponsors in there. But they always have one, which obviously begs the question, would these make a good track? That is right. Today we are back with the trusty tier list to answer the question, which Formula 1 trophy would make the best Formula 1 track? Mainly because we now don't have any races for a month and I needed something to pass the time. The process for judging this is pretty simple. We are going to take the most recent trophy used at each event on the 2026 Formula 1 calendar and then make a track out of the front view of that trophy, or at least the best front view photo I can find, while keeping a few things the same between all the tracks to keep the judging fair. Firstly, we assume each of these tracks are flat because any corner profile could be interesting if you stick it on the side of a massive hill. Then we're going to go around each of these tracks clockwise, just because, and then we are going to assume each of these tracks is roughly average Formula 1 track length, between 5 and 6 kilometers, unless the layout suggests something obviously different. Also, unique to this video about trophies, we're going to be ignoring any part of a trophy that's just a boring black base, because most trophies have this, and so if we included it, all of them would be kind of samey in that part of the track. If the trophy has a more unique base, it can keep it, but any of them with this boring black blob are having it cut off. And then one other thing specific to tracks, there's too many cups. Why do we have so many cups? These aren't even useful cups. This is wildly impractical to have a cheeky little beverage out of. Because all of these are basically the same shape with some minor differences, we are only going to do one cup and then exclude all the others. Now obviously there might be some debate over which is the best cup. Some favourites obviously include the Dutch Grand Prix, the Hungarian Grand Prix, maybe the British Grand Prix because it's massive and gold. But obviously we're going to do the only cup that actually matters, the delightfully lumpy Constructors' Championship Trophy, and all the others are going in the bin. Also in the bin are the 3 tracks which are just copies of one another. Looking at you, Singapore, Mexico and Abu Dhabi, like, come on. Someone has clearly been copying someone else's homework. Can we please have the original dates for all of these so we know who did it first? Right, okay. Mexico, Abu Dhabi, you're going in the bin. Singapore, you can stay. Then one final trophy I'm putting in the bin is Qatar, because this is the laziest thing I have ever seen. I am not dignifying this with an entry on the tier list. In the bin with you too. Go on. That means we are left with 13 trophies to rank, but I'm thinking that might not be enough to make sure we've definitely found the best one. So I'm going to fill out the numbers with some fan favourites and interesting designs from the history of Formula 1. Lovely. Let's start by going through this year's calendar in order, and then we can get on to the funky stuff from the past. If you were paying attention, you might have noticed that the season started a few weeks ago in Australia. Now, the Australian Grand Prix is one of those that has the same trophy every year, specifically the Sir Jack Brabham Trophy, which looks like this. A giant old school steering wheel. Great. Turning this into a track, we get... It's going to be one of those videos, isn't it? We get a big circle. So to talk through a lap around here, off the line, you're immediately in turn 1, and then you're in turn 1, and then you're still in turn 1, and then, oh hey, there's the line, and then you're in turn 1, and then you're in turn... This is obviously a flat out track, but unlike a stock car oval, it does not have the intrigue of entering and exiting corners with the potential to take different lines. It is just a single right turn. As much as I would love to say that Big Circle would be great for the meme of it all, I can't. This would be trash to watch, and so I really can't put it any higher than D tier on the tier list. It's not quite F tier because while it may be very boring, it's not quite soul crushing like some tracks we've seen before, and some we're gonna see very soon. But a nice low placement to start the video. Lovely. Miami is up next, and they have this as a trophy. It's basically the Hard Rock Stadium from next to the track, but with shin splints. I quite like it. As a track though, this thing does have some interesting corner profiles. We start with a difficult flick around turn 1 while you're trying to get on the brakes hard for turn 2, where somebody is going to crash. Nice. But then this section from turns 3 to 9, I absolutely hate. If turns 5 and 6 turn out to be a fun double apex left, similar to Shanghai turn 9 and 10, then that's pretty cool, but I think they might be slightly too far apart for that, and then all the rest of this is just way too slow. Which is a shame, because then later in the lap we get another interesting braking challenge through turns 11 and 12. It's basically the same as turns 1 and 2, but it's better than nothing. The slow section and the overall lack of creativity for the Miami Trophy do hurt it in the rankings, and so I'm thinking maybe low C tier. Certainly more going on than Australia, but will it be fun in the race? Well, maybe about as fun as the actual Miami Grand Prix, which is to say, no. Okay, so that's two not great tracks to start off the video. Could we maybe have something a little bit more interesting? Okay, I see what you're going for, Canada. I quite like that. Since it came back after lockdown, Canada has mostly used this swirly ribbon looking trophy. And actually, it's got enough details to it that when we turn it into a track, we get something quite interesting, and something that actually looks like a track for the first time in this video. Turns 1 and 2 again give us a lovely little challenge under braking, as obviously you want to dive into turn 2 as late and as wide as possible, which means you need to do that over the apex curbs of turn 1. Then turns 3 to 8 are nothing special, but at least this first chicane is not too aggressive, just a little wiggle from side to side, so I picture it being like a slower version of Ascari from Monza. But then the second half of this track is where it really comes alive, with a lovely collection of high and medium speed corners after turn 10. Flat through 11 and 12 means we have another interesting braking zone into turn 13 and potentially an overtaking opportunity, and then turn 14 is the perfect corner profile which dares you to try and take it flat out, but we know that one driver is going to get it wrong in the race and end up spinning off into the gravel. Overall, I would say this has a similar vibe to somewhere like Baku or maybe even Suzuka, with some slow sections to test the driver's accuracy and then some very fast corners and some flat out sections to give that proper racing spectacle. I'm thinking it's a solid track for those reasons then, and I'm kind of torn between high B tier, low A tier. On one hand, we have seen better tracks, but on the other hand, I do like a place that gives us some sketchy corner profiles to really challenge a driver. And so you know what, I'm going to follow my heart and I am going to stick this up in A tier, which gives us some nice balance from the disappointing tracks that started off this video. Can we get another good one though? Seriously, Monaco? You're telling me that the most historic and prestigious race on the calendar has a PNG of the track as its trophy. Also, I don't know if I'm going crazy, but it looks like someone has messed with the shape of this thing, because when I do turn it into a track, it looks kind of wonky. Like, what happened to the swimming pool section? Why is it so small now? Anyway, we had a very similar thing happen in the track logos as tracks video, because apparently Monaco is obsessed with its track layout. And so we had to judge this weird alternate reality version of Monaco where it's actually the size of a normal Formula 1 track and not some tiny Mario Kart Baby Park-esque nonsense like in real life. Stretching this thing out so that one lap is about 5.5 kilometers, about 1.6 times as big as real life, obviously improves the racing around here, even if the swimming pool section has been squished. And therefore, we can confidently stick this thing up in A tier as well, along with Canada, proving to Australia and Miami that you can have a good track as your trophy. As long as you don't mind the actual trophy looking like trash. Speaking of, next up is Barcelona, which last year hosted the Spanish Grand Prix and used this trophy. Who told you this was a good idea? They lied to you. When turning this one into a track, I did cut the bottom off this block, which in hindsight I could have left because it's not just a generic black plinth, but it leaves us with this track, which I think actually is quite interesting. This type of layout with a big rectangle is quite common for circuits, particularly in places where it's partially a street track in a place with a grid system. And then of course we cannot ignore the similarities to Bahrain, because this just appears to be Sakir's taller sibling. I would say this is okay as a track. It is obviously just Barcelona up until turn 7, even if turn 4 has been stretched out slightly, but then the second half has been replaced by several long straights, with the first 2 corners of Bahrain thrown in for good measure. Maybe a slightly less interesting track for qualifying than actual Barcelona then, but it should provide some good racing with some clear overtaking opportunities at the end of these long straights and some slower sections for fighting up in the north. Overall, I'm thinking high B tier, low A once more, but looking at these other 2 tracks, I can't see any reason why it's worse than those, and so it's going to go in A tier as well. The next race on the calendar is the Austrian Grand Prix, which once... Would you please stop using a track map as a trophy? Hang on a minute. Much like Monaco, when we turn this thing into a track, it's not exactly the same as the actual track map. Turns 1 and 3 have been widened to make them faster, the corners in the middle have had the opposite treatment to make them slower, and then the final 2 corners have been replaced by one huge right-hander, much like something out of an oval. And I don't hate these changes. The opportunity to overtake under braking at turn 1 is now completely gone, but you never saw that anyway in Formula 1, and actually now that it's wider, you might be able to get cars going side by side through here. And then the new profile for turn 3 is still tight enough that you need to be on the brakes for a while, and a dive bomb is still possible. I do think I prefer the middle and final sectors from the actual track, but this thing is still solid, and so it's definitely getting a good placement on the tier list. The actual Red Bull Ring is a banger track for Formula 1 in my opinion, and this reprofiling still keeps a lot of that same vibe, while making some interesting changes to corner profiles which could spice up the racing, and so I think this is a clear S tier track. When I started making this video, I realised I could not remember what the trophy looked like at Belgium last year, but I don't know how I forgot it, because this is some janky trash. Just some bottom shelf, bargain bin, kids design competition garbage that they somehow had the audacity to give to Oscar Piastri. But would it be good as a track? Obviously, the only sensible way to do this is with not 1, not 2, but 5 crossovers, giving us a track with an overall feel similar to the Jeddah Corniche. Basically, 2 long squiggly straights with a variety of medium and high speed corners, a hairpin at one end to turn around and come back again, and then, in a slight departure from Jeddah, an oval at the end of the lap. Now, I would love to hate this and say it's a stupid track. No, actually, it is a stupid track, but it might just be stupid in the way that makes it a lot of fun. We do have a lot of variety when it comes to the corner profiles, with some potential overtaking opportunities through turns 2 and 3, and maybe up into the hairpin at the top if you can follow closely enough. This is clearly a difficult track to master, and it's hard to look at it and not imagine it surrounded by walls which will punish even the tiniest of mistakes. Therefore, I'm thinking it should go relatively high up on the tier list. I am concerned there's not many places where cars could fight side by side here, and then it's going to be pretty hard to tell what's going on with cars constantly disappearing into tunnels, but I think it would be a fun track to try, so I am going to stick it up in B C tier, the first one of the video. The next race on the calendar with a trophy to talk about is the Italian Grand Prix, which last year had this trophy. Now you might be asking, what is this? Great question. So apparently, this trophy is called Chimera, and it's a combination of the 3 fastest animals from the air, sea, and land. So basically, it's a falcon with the fin of a sailfish and then the tail of a cheetah. Or 2 cheetahs, apparently. Cool, great. You do you, Monza. Nice one. Question is, though, is it a good track? It is not. Immediately, if we get up to more than 30 corners, that's too many for Formula 1. And then, 5 hairpins, a quintuple hairpin. What's wrong with you? Well, this track has a couple of faster sections, including this interesting fling through the middle of turns 23, 4, 5. The rest of it is excruciatingly slow. Just as tight and winding as Monaco, but over a longer lap, meaning it's going to take a while for cars to get around here, and they're not going to be having any on-track battles while they're doing that. It's not exactly like the spectacle of watching cars drive around here is going to be particularly good either, as it's just going to be a slow procession around a track more suited to rally cars than Formula 1. And so we can quite confidently stick this thing down in F tier, right at the bottom of the tier list, but at least that's fitting for the Falcon Fish Cheetah hybrid. The trophy of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix plays into the country's name, the Land of Fire, with a simple, sleek flame design. That, or they wanted it to look like the pincer of a giant grey lobster man. We will never know. Turning this into a track, we get a simple 9-corner layout which is reminiscent of the Red Bull Ring once more. A couple obvious overtaking opportunities with these tight corners at the end of long straight sections, and then some fast off-throttle sweepers which you need to absolutely maximise because there is nowhere else to make up time around here. I can't see how this would be too much different from a race at the Red Bull Ring, and that's definitely not a bad thing. It is not as successful as the actual Red Bull Ring, and I don't think it's as good as the Austrian Trophy either, so it's not going up in S tier, but it's a solid A tier track, which is getting pretty full at this point in the video. So we saw the Singapore Grand Prix trophy earlier, as it's one of several big Silver Bird trophies, with this one basically just being the logo for Singapore Airlines, but this one has been around the longest, so it gets to go up on the tier list. It's a simple shape, and so when we turn this one into a track, we get something equally simple. 9 corners, once again, much like Azerbaijan, but I will say, due to the symmetrical nature of this trophy, it's a lot less interesting than that one. You have to do a little wah around 5 hairpins, and then it's just 2 90-degree rides. That's it. This is the kind of track where, in theory, overtakes will happen just due to the nature of the layout, but I don't think anyone is going to have any fun while doing so. Not much else to say about this one then, as it is just so simple. And so we can stick it straight into a very bland C tier on the tier list. Obviously, being bland is not good, but it can get so much worse. After the US Grand Prix had to cancel their trophies in 2024 for some minor copyright infringement issues, they wanted to go all in for 2025 and dropped this. And yes, that is 2 track maps squished together with some horns to make a bull skull trophy. Macabre and ridiculously oversized. I love it. However, turning this thing into a track makes something that I do not love, as this is awful. 34 corners means it's now the most corners we've seen on a track so far this video, and the ones in the middle of the track come at you so fast that I couldn't even label them. If you're thinking, oh, we do at least get some of the interesting S's from the actual COTA track, no, because we've had to scale this thing to meet F1 track length requirements, these are now way smaller than the actual COTA S's and therefore way less fun. Overall, this track is horribly tight and claustrophobic, and could only really work if it was scaled up to Nürburgring size and used for endurance racing. For Formula 1, it does not work for either qualifying or the race, and so it is going straight down into F tier along with the Italian abomination. But it's good news if you like massive, gaudy American trophies, because the United States Grand Prix was not the only race to give us one. Las Vegas gave us this massive, light-up, gemstone-looking thing. Turning this into a track, we get... oh no. On one side of this track, we get a pretty standard straight with some fun kinks in it. Cool. On the other side of the track though, we have a rally stage. There is no argument to be made that this could be a fun challenge with corners coming at you thick and fast like some people might make about Jeddah. This is straight up neck-breaking torture. If Alonso and Stroll were complaining about a little bit of nerve damage for driving the AMR 26, they should just wait until they have to drive around this place where you would be lucky to come out of here with a working spine. It's a shame because for a brief moment, these corners, either side of the start-finish line, do absolutely slap. If, in the future, Las Vegas decides to keep these but incorporate them into something slightly less Kafkaesque, then we could have a decent track on our hands. But until that point, this one is again going right down in F tier. Right, that is all of the trophies from the last 12 months which didn't get disqualified at the start of the video. And so I think it's time to start looking back through the history of this sport and some other interesting designs. And of course, there is no trophy with more history than the Constructors' Champions Trophy. Now, before all of you history nerds chime in and tell me that the Drivers' Championship is actually older because that started in 1950 and the Constructors only started in 1958, yes, well done you. But I think you will find that the Drivers' Champion Trophy was only made in 1995, whereas this thing is old. Because a badge of each year's winning constructor is stuck on the side of this thing, the trophy is now lumpy. But actually, when we turn this thing into a track, those lumps don't affect the overall shape too much. This is therefore a pretty basic, symmetrical, quite generic track, and I hope you can start to see why I didn't want to do 10 different cups. We do have some beautifully tricky corners here, like the turn 1-2 complex, which could have a vibe similar to a flat Eau Rouge Radeon, and that's about it. I haven't labelled it as corners, but the northern section of this track is wavy due to the lumpy nature of the trophy. I don't think it's wavy enough to make the cars have to turn, more just bamboozle the drivers a little bit. But other than the wavy straights, there is nothing really interesting going on this track, and so I think it can go with the other uninteresting tracks down in C tier. Looking back through time, one trophy I particularly remember from recent years is the Italian Grand Prix trophy from 2024, which looked like this. What is it? I don't know, but I can tell you it's called Vroom, which I've heard is a fun word to put on some merchandise. Other than that though, when turning this one into a track, I did ignore the silver base once more and only use the black thing, and while you wouldn't have guessed it from just looking at the trophy, it's just the Nürburgring, but flipped over. Sadly, I don't think that translates into anything all that interesting for Grand Prix racing. We have a lot of corners here, not the most on the trophy calendar, but still quite a few, but my issue is that they're not actually that varied. This is one of those tracks that could be great if it was just simplified a little bit. Maybe remove turns 7, 8, 9, simplify this entire catastrophe down at the bottom, that sort of thing, and then we could have a genuinely good B or even A tier track. But as it stands, this thing has a load of constant radius corners all at the same radius, which gives a very repetitive lap. And so it's going to have to go with the other repetitive circuits down in C tier. We travel back a couple more years to 2018 and 19 when the Belgian Grand Prix had this trophy in collaboration with our title sponsor, Johnny Walker. Now, I wanted to do this one because it's an interesting trophy, but do I have high hopes for it to be a good track? No. And, oh look, it's absolutely horrendous. The lap starts fine enough with this section reminiscent of the Monaco swimming pool, but then we get into these three massive prongs down in the south. Where have I seen a layout like this before? There must have been one specific track that had something just like this, but I can't quite remember the name. That's it. Caesar's Palace! Welcome back to Formula 1! For real though, this is awful, and then it's followed by a section that might be even worse, as this is clearly something out of a hill climb. The final sector of the lap is more normal, but it's still not good. Still far too tight, with this horrible rally stage looking protrusion to slow things right down. And so overall, and this is the first time in my life I'm going to say this, I do not like what Johnny Walker has made, and this thing is once again going down in F tier with the other soul-crushing nightmares. We go back even further in time to the 2009 Brazilian Grand Prix, where Mark Webber lifted this beautiful blue trophy, the only time it was ever used. This is certainly one of the more memorable trophies in Formula 1 history, but I would like to point out that Interlagos has a bit of a history of weird trophies, because just 1 year later, Sebastian Vettel was given this big credit card, which I did not turn into a track because it would just be Indianapolis, but I wanted to show in this video because it's just really weird. Anyway, back to the big blue butt plug, and when we turn this thing into a track, we do get another big circle, but this time, unlike Australia, it's got some other details for us to talk about. I'm a big fan of a long, fast corner that tightens ever so slightly, so drivers have to balance their car on the edge of grip while teasing the throttle as much as they dare to avoid spinning out at high speeds. This is nice. And I do think the layout of 5 and 6 gives an interesting challenge again, trying to carry as much speed as possible while getting on the brakes for a hairpin while turning. Other than that though, this track is pretty repetitive, and sadly, what it's repeating is more hairpins. Why do these tracks love hairpins so much? Out of the 12 corners here, only 4 are proper corners which aren't hairpins, and that is just not a good ratio. And so, even though Brazil 09 did try a lot harder than Australia, it's only going to go one step higher on the tier list, up in C tier, which is also getting pretty full. We venture back even further into the noughties now, before the ban on tobacco advertising, where this Marlboro steering wheel was used for 6 years between 2000 and 2005. But here's a little quiz question for you. Which Grand Prix was this used for? That's enough time. If you said the Hungarian Grand Prix, you would be right. And if you didn't say the Hungarian Grand Prix, fair enough, because absolutely nothing about this is Hungarian. Daddy Marlboro got to advertise his ciggies though! Turning this into a track gives us almost an oval, but the keen eyed will notice these 4 ever so subtle chicanes in the corners. This thing is kind of like the Bahrain outer loop layout, but only the outer loop shortcut with the funky little chicane. While that corner was fun when we briefly used it in Formula 1, having only that corner doesn't exactly make the most riveting layout, and much like the Jack Brabham Trophy at the start of this video, sending Formula 1 cars around an oval is not going to score you too highly on the tier list. This one is ever so slightly more interesting than the big circle, and so I think I could stretch to 1 tier higher, up in C tier. We then jump back another decade in time to take a look at one of the most beloved trophies in all of Formula 1 history, which is of course the Sonic Trophy from the 1993 European Grand Prix at Donington Park. For those of you who are not familiar with the glorious history of this Grand Prix, basically, Sega went all in sponsoring this event with Sonic branding, which is why we get the Sonic Trophy and also outstanding photos like this. You can see why people say Formula 1 was more glamorous back in the day. Turning this into a track, we get something that is still surprisingly recognizable as Sonic, but also has a number of interesting corner ideas. I'm a particular fan of this section from turns 18 through to 23, basically the series of fast right-handers which should be just about flat if you're brave enough. This is followed by the last few corners from Kota, which then leads us onto a couple more fast corners before one final heavy deceleration into a 90 right to take us across the start-finish line. So a good end to the lap then, but I can't say I'm as optimistic about the start. The first couple corners are fine enough, but then I'm pretty bummed by this chicane at 3, 4, 5, which really just ruins the flow of the first sector. That's sad, because we then have a beautiful flat out run all the way to turn 8, which is sure to be a spectacle in both qualifying and the race, as cars are flinging themselves across the apexes of turns 6 and 7. The middle sector of this lap, Le Tête de Sonic, is the worst part overall. Turns 11, 12 and 13 are kind of interesting, but the rest of it is just too slow. I will say one thing about this track: even if it doesn't have the best collection of corner complexes I've ever seen, it does one thing really well, which is having a beautiful variety of corners and 3 distinct sectors to keep a lap around here interesting. And so all in all, I'm actually on board with the Sonic track. It's complicated and definitely not the best thing we've seen today, but it's far from being the worst. And actually, I'm happy putting it up in B tier, much like the... Sorry. hang on a second. I'm getting word of a last-minute disqualification. It turns out the Sonic Trophy is not actually a Formula 1 race winner's trophy. For some reason, even though all the grid girls were dressed in their nightmarish Sonic outfits, the Sonic Trophy was not actually made the official trophy for the event. This was, and so the Sonic Trophy was just also there, which means I can't accept it onto my tier list. It will therefore have to be cast into the fire of disqualification. Or, I suppose, just back in that store cupboard at McLaren where they kept it for a couple decades. We can't end the video on that disappointment. We need one more fan favourite track to round out this video. And I know just the thing. As we know from previous tracks tier lists, a big animal is always a good way to go. And so trophy, big animal, there's only one logical choice here. May I present to you the French Grand Prix Big Monkey. The French Grand Prix had this trophy for quite a few years. Why? No, I'm asking you. Why? I have no idea. But actually, I don't need to know why to be able to appreciate the Big Monkey. And I do appreciate the Big Monkey. I love you, Big Monkey. The sport hasn't been the same since you left us, Big Monkey. Where have you gone, Big Monkey? Anyway, turning this into a track gives us something with some organic corner shapes, which has been a rarity in this video. This is basically a lap of two halves, with a slow first half of the lap and then a fast and thrilling second half. And in that second half, I would like to draw attention to turn 16, because this is an excellent example of how a couple simple corner profiles can make something amazing when combined in the right way. If turn 16 is profiled just right, then it's a grip the wheel and pray type flat out kink where you fling yourself through into turn 17, not even touching the brakes until you're halfway to turn 18, carrying as much speed as possible. Beautiful. And then we got some similarly tricky ideas in the first half of the lap as well. You have to try and ride the curbs over turn 3 to maximize your entry to 4, which forms the first part of this beautiful double apex right with turn 5, where the track then narrows on exit, reducing space and punishing any imperfections. Oh, this track is full of little details like that, which I think will make it an absolute spectacle in qualifying. I am, however, a little concerned about the race. Similarly to places like Suzuka, just because this thing would be fun over one lap does not mean it would be good for a Formula 1 Grand Prix. And looking at it, I really can't see where cars would ever be able to get side by side. I so wanted to love Le Circuit de Grand Songe, but I cannot justify putting it in the top tiers of the tier list. It will therefore have to settle for B tier, as a banger qualifying track and nothing more. And on that grand hominid disappointment, our tier list for the video is complete. I'm quite surprised to see so many trophies up in the top tiers of this tier list, because honestly, I was expecting all of them to be in C tier or below, but it just goes to show you that sometimes you can find the best tracks in the most unusual of places. And it also shows you that loads of tracks just have a track map as their trophy, which is sort of cheating, but it's my video, so shh.